Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live on this beautiful Monday, Martin Luther King Jr. birthday day of celebration. We're so thrilled to be here with you live. Today is January 18th, 2021. So I'm Shannon Penrod and I'm grateful to be here. And I was running a little bit late this morning. I think it's the latest I've ever been to start the show, scaring Traven half to death. But we're excited to be here with you this morning. We're going to be live for the next hour talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. And we want to welcome you here because you're a part of that conversation. We want you to be a part of that conversation. So there's many different ways to watch us live. Right now we're live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Periscope, and we might be live on autism-live.com as well. But we are definitely live on those four. Hello, good morning, Amanda. And we're welcoming you to be here and be a part of the conversation. If you are live in any of those big four platforms, you don't have to leave. You can stay right there and put your comment in from that site. If you would like to watch us later on, or you are watching us later on, then you're probably watching us in podcast form, which we're still available on those big four: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope. But we also podcast to all major podcasting platforms. So we're on iTunes, we're on Apple Music, Deezer. Traven's running through them on the screen. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Ghana, where aren't we? And that's a good question for you. Because if you see that you go to your podcasting platform and you're like, well, Autism Live is not there, will you please do me a favor and let us know, because we would like to be there. Our criteria is that it's got to be free to the user. So we are a free download in all of those places. We think that that's a really important part of our mission. And our mission is to provide information and inspiration to the autism community. But when we say autism community, we're talking about the larger autism community, which starts, of course, with individuals who are on the autism spectrum. I always say they're the beating heart of this community. There are reasons why, right? But we include in that community everyone who loves those individuals. It's just as, clear as that. So that could be absolutely anyone. It should be everyone, right? Eventually, it should be everyone. And we hope to be a part of making that possible. But in the meantime, we believe very strongly that individuals who are on the autism spectrum deserve all of the respect, dignity, choices, ability to be employed, to choose who they love, how they love, where they work, so on and so forth, how they spend their free time, right? And so we think that while this community is so diverse, like there are probably millions of things that we could never all agree on, right? Because it is so individual and so diverse. We believe that we can agree on that: the rights, the dignity, the access to all things for individuals who are on the autism spectrum. So we hope to shed light. I always say information and inspiration. We count on you to help us to know what we're missing. And so that's why we love it when you ask questions, provide your comments. We find that it's the funnest part of the show. I mean, we have some wonderful experts, and I do like to talk about the fact that we have lots of experts, and I'm not one of them. But the funnest part for us is when you're talking to us. So, and I think I speak for everybody who's involved in the show. That's when it gets the most interesting. That's when it's the most fun. So please feel free to write into us. Now, if you're watching us recorded, and I know a lot of you were watching over the weekend. I was so thrilled that people caught the marathon on Saturday and Sunday on Facebook, where we show 4 of the episodes that we do during the week, we show on the weekend back to back. And those are pre-recorded, obviously. We do them live here and then we play them on Saturday. And I know sometimes it's confusing to people. Are we live? Are we recorded? Because they want to be able to interact. And I just want to tell you that you can always interact with us on our homepage, autism-live.com. Now, I'm not going to lie and tell you that someone is manning that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They aren't. But that's a way that you can interact and you can send in your questions and then watch the show. We usually address questions on the live feature on autism-live.com. At the beginning of Ask Dr. Doreen, we try to, throw some of those questions in. So tune in on Wednesdays when Dr. Doreen is here when we can answer those questions. John says, you're the best expert I've listened to. Thank you. Well, I'm not an expert in really anything. Literally nothing. But here's what I am. I am somebody who's in your corner, who wants to help you to get what you want to. Now, I'm not an expert, but that doesn't mean that I don't have knowledge. And like all of you, you have knowledge that you can share with all of us that we can all learn from. I'm a former teacher and I'm curious and I love knowledge. So I have been hosting shows about autism. I think I'm in my 13th year. I'm not good at math. Another thing I'm not an expert at, numbers. But I think I'm in my 13th year of covering autism. And I'm in my 16th year. Oh my gosh, I just realized that it's like, it's pretty much the anniversary of when my son was diagnosed. I think it was like, okay, so do the math here. 16 years ago, last week, 16 years ago last week, that he was diagnosed. And I knew, almost double zeros, nothing about autism. And I had to, like a lot of you, I had to rush to catch up and to learn as much as I could on the fly. Not like you go to college and go, oh, I'm going to start on page 1, autism. No, that's not how it happens for a lot of us. So I am deeply curious, and I've learned along the way in those 16 years, and I've especially learned interviewing experts for 13 years. So I'm not saying I don't know anything. I'm just saying I'm not an expert. So we like to be abundantly clear about that. But we do have lots of experts here on the show, and that's a really wonderful thing. We're thrilled always when we can bring you people who are in the know. But can I just say this? When I go to get experts, I really am paying attention to what the things are that you guys ask for. So if I get a bunch of people, that's how we came to have Bonnie Yates on the show, that we had so many people who were writing in saying, I need enough information about how my child, what my child's rights are, what my rights are in the school setting, that we were like, okay, well, let's get Bonnie Yates in here. And she did a couple of shows. And then it just seemed like we had a steady flow of questions. And so Bonnie became first a semi-regular and then a regular. So, and she's a wonderful special education attorney. Hey, somebody wrote in over the weekend, and I tried to address it. I had a million things going at once, and I don't always get a clear thought in. But somebody wrote in over the weekend and said, does Bonnie work for CARD, and does she just handle CARD clients? And I think I wrote in and said, but who knows how lucid I was. Like I said, I was doing 8 things at once. I'm not good at that. But Bonnie Yates does not work for Center for Autism and Related Disorders in any way, shape, or form. She is a special education attorney, and she's with Tollner Law Offices. So if you're looking to find Bonnie, you can go to Tollner Law Offices. I don't think that that's their website, but just put in Bonnie Yates Tollner with 2 L's Law Offices, and you will get that website. I should know it by now, and I apologize. But Bonnie certainly has handled a fair amount of CARD clients over the years and is very familiar with the CARD program and the benefits of it, very familiar. But she takes clients who've never heard of CARD. And so there we go. Look, see how good Traven in there's the Tollner Law Office's website. It's specialeducationcouncil.com, specialeducationcouncil.com. And that's how you can find Bonnie. Now, Bonnie is not going to be with us today, so that's a bummer, but it is Martin Luther King Junior's birthday. And so she is off today, and we hope that she is having a wonderful time. But we're not. We're here with you in all that beauty. So one of the things that we like to start the show with on Mondays is something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani are those experts talking about? What do these terms have to do with us? Why should we learn them? I don't know about you, but I get tired at certain times. I'm a very curious. Thank you, Amanda, for putting that up there for us as well to her page. Amanda's like our, assistant here on the show. So we always appreciate you're such a wealth of knowledge. So anyway, I get tired sometimes. I'm a very curious person. I like to learn, but sometimes I'm like, really? Seriously? Like I got to learn a whole other thing here now. When Autism came to visit our house and came to live at our house, I was like, seriously, like not only do I need to know about autism, but I got to learn a bunch of psychology terms, and then I got to learn about all this governmental stuff. And then, when we were pushing for insurance to fund autism, it was like, are you kidding me? Now I got to learn a bunch of insurance terms. Now, I'll fuss about it for a little while, but then I figure out what I think a lot of you have figured out along the way, which is, sometimes being in the know saves you time and money. So we take on the jargon, one word, one phrase, one acronym at a time to sort of put things in our toolkit, that we go, okay, I kind of know what that is. And over time, we'll get a little bit more familiar with it. So first, what we do is we give you the actual definition. Then whenever possible, I make fun of the actual definition because that's me. And then we'll give you the working definition, which sometimes makes the experts apoplectic, but that's just part of the fun too. And then I try to give you an example of it so you can sort of see how it would fit into your life. And if you don't get it, it's not something to get all fatootsed about because sometimes these terms take a little while. They got to gestate, they got to marinate, if you will. And then you got to see it a couple of times before you go, now I get what she was talking about. So I love today's term because I think it's something that applies to all of our lives and something that we could put more into effect for a better, saner, kinder humanity. We're talking, of course, about errorless learning. I remember the first time somebody told me they used the term errorless learning, and I was like, errorless learning? Does that mean you're going to give me the answers? I'm a former teacher. Errorless learning, is that where you give me the answers? And it's like ding, 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 to some extent. So let's take a look at what our actual definition for errorless learning is. Let's see how much jargon they can pack into this definition. An instructional design introduced by psychologist B.F. Skinner. I know a lot of people are fond of Skinner, but I'm a little not anymore, but that's okay. He taught us a lot of things. Introduced by B.F. Skinner in the 1930s as part of his studies on what would make the most effective learning environment. Skinner said, errors are not necessary for learning to occur. Now, this much of Skinner, I agree with. Amanda says, in my RBT group, you would not believe how many people recommended your jargon of the day for a study guide. You know what? So we'll get to that in a second. Let's finish up with errorless learning, and then I'll tell you a funny story about that. So Skinner says errors are not necessary to learn for learning to occur. Now, as a teacher, a former teacher, but I say once a teacher, always a teacher, and as a parent, I love this. I love looking at things this way. Errors are not necessary for learning to occur. Now, doesn't this sound like a really great way of attacking something? But what does it all boil down to? What does it actually really mean? So let's take a look at our working definition. Working definition for errorless learning. It is teaching procedures that are specifically designed so that the learner does not have to and does not make mistakes as they learn new information. Now, why? Why? And essentially, it's giving them the right answer, but being clever about it. Like sometimes we're not telling them, hey, I'm going to give you the answer here, but sometimes it means not giving them the choice of failing. Now, why would that be something that would be beneficial as you start to teach someone something? Well, I don't know about you, but I don't like to be wrong and I don't like to fail. I like to succeed. And in my life, there are, I've learned a lot of new things. And sometimes you start doing something when you're learning it and you just have an affinity for it, right? I call it like that feeling of being flung down a wind tunnel when it just all makes sense, right? I know people that in my life that somebody handed them a guitar at 13 and it was just made sense, just made sense. And they could play the guitar and they found their passion, right? I watched that movie last night. Oh my gosh, so good. The documentary about the guy who was the White House photographer for Obama and also for Ronald Reagan. Oh, I'm telling you guys, watch this documentary. But he was talking about the fact that he went off to college and he didn't know what he wanted to be. And he took one photography class and he called his mom and he said, I think I want to be a photographer. It just made sense. The camera in his hands. He loved being in the dark room. I said to my husband while we were watching it, I said, I wanted to love photography. I love taking pictures. I love looking at pictures. I love playing with pictures. And I took a photography class in high school and I hated the chemicals, hated them, hated being in the dark room because there's the one phase in the dark room when you had to take the film out of the container and it had to be pitch black. And I hated it. It gave me panic attacks. I said to him, can you imagine? Like, those are the parts of photography that I didn't like. Now, if I were a high school student now and took a photography class with all digital, the parts I don't like are gone. So I'm just saying that some things in life, they're reinforcing in and of themselves because we're good at it or something about it makes sense to us. And we're willing to go through difficult things. It's not like the guy who was the White House photographer never made a mistake as a photographer, never missed a shot. He did, but he didn't mind because everything else was so reinforcing and he was willing to jump through hoops to be able to get better and become a true artist, right? The person who plays the guitar in the beginning, I'm sure that they didn't have the calluses on their finger and they had to build them up, but they were willing to go through the tough parts because there was enough other stuff that was happening reinforcing. But what happens when you want to be good at something that you don't have that affinity? And it's just tough in the beginning. It's just hard. Like, we're not all ballroom dancers. I'm sure that, a lot of us are like, I'd like to be able to move like that, but I'm not willing to go through what those people go through to get that far. Now, that's okay. I don't need to be a ballroom dancer, but what if I'm someone who just isn't picking up language? What happens then? And I don't have an affinity for it. In fact, it's frustrating for me. How do we get me to the point where I've got buy-in and I'm willing to work through the hard things because I want to, because I'm getting some sort of a paycheck for it? Well, anytime we have something difficult that we want to teach to someone that they're struggling with, the rules of ABA say we want to start with reinforcing them. So how do we do that if they don't already know how to do something? Well, we do errorless learning. And we do a couple of other techniques that are really pivotal to ABA, but we start with some small sliver of a skill that we're trying to build up to learn, and we make it so that it's impossible to fail. And how do we do that? With language, for instance, but by the way, we can do this with everything. With language, we're going to be talking over the next couple of weeks about all the verbal operants and how we teach someone to discriminate sounds and what the names of objects are, both, to be able to hear and recognize it, but also to be able to express themselves either through sign or language, vocal speech, you know what I mean? Text. There are lots of different ways of communicating, but we want them to be able to hear and respond in a way that is useful and productive. Functional communication, we call it. So how do we start that? We start with something called errorless learning, where we will, put an object or a color or something. I've got my phone here and you can't really see my desktop, so I'm going to make a desktop with my hand. So I put the phone on the table and there's nothing else on the table. And I say to the child in as few sounds as possible, which is why you hear people say touch phone, right? because I don't want to say, can you take your hand and touch the phone? Because now there's just this stream of language that I've got to sort through. So I'm going to say touch phone, and then I'm going to take the child's hand and gently take it over, have them touch the phone and go, yes. And I'm going to tickle them and ruffle their hair and laugh with them and smile, whatever is reinforcing for that child, because some kids don't like to be tickled or have their hair touched, right? But I'm going to do this a bunch of times. And in the beginning, people go, well, that's just ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. You're not teaching that child anything. But I am. What I'm teaching this child is that you can be right. You can be right. And when you're right, it feels good. And you're capable of being right. Touch phone. And eventually I'll stop the physical prompt so that eventually I'll say touch phone and they'll touch their phone. Now, do they know what touch means? Do they know what phone means? No, not yet, but they will eventually, because we're going to teach them how to discriminate between touch phone and touch pen and touch computer and touch Apple. We're going to teach them all of that kind of stuff. And we're going to teach them pickup, but we're going to start with that errorless learning. Now, if you're watching and you have a child in your life who is learning language, and they can be on the autism spectrum or not on the autism spectrum, but you have a child who's learning language, there's lots of different ways to do this. And of course, I recommend an ABA therapist, but there's something super easy that you can get. There's an app, and it's called CAMP, C-A-M-P, Discovery. And what I love about it, it's created by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I just happen to love that about it, but that's just, information for you. But what I love about it is that it follows the rules of ABA. So the child sits there with an iPad or whatever. And by the way, this is free. You can go get this, it's free. And if you want to see a perfect example of how errorless learning gets put into a series of things to learn somebody, go get Camp Discovery, because it's right there. So the first thing that happens is that, you turn on the app and it's got a little village, like a snow village, and children get this much more than adults do, but it's got a path of lessons that you can do. So the child clicks and it goes to the first lesson. And the first thing that it does is a preference assessment. It's trying to see, what does this child like? So it gives them a bunch of boxes of things, and the child clicks one, and they know to do it. That kids know how to do. And they'll learn just from, having their hands on this. So they click one, and maybe it's the duck. And so, it makes a little whew, that because you clicked on the duck. Then it'll show more stuff, and the duck is there, but the duck's in a different place. And they might click on the duck again, or now they might click on, the flowers. Okay, great. And then it'll do it. It might do it 3, 4, 5 times, because what it's doing is taking data on, what does this child like? Does it just like things that are in that corner, or does it like ducks? This child likes ducks. And it stores that and goes, I'm going to get you some ducks. Right? I'm going to help you out with some ducks here. But then it gives the first lesson, and in that category, and it says, so a duck appears on the screen and they go, touch the duck. And if the child touches the duck, and that's errorless learning, there's nothing else but a duck, and it says touch the duck. Right. And if the child touches the duck, then little baby ducks swirl, right? It's that kind of a thing. If they don't touch the duck, there's no sound or anything like that, but the duck will start to get bigger. So maybe it's that the duck was too small, and they'll go touch the duck, and then the duck will start to pulse. That's errorless learning, because I'm saying, I want you to touch the duck. And when you do, you're going to get a reinforcer. Then gradually it gets harder and harder for them to discriminate between the duck. Eventually, they're going to give them a field of 3, and the duck is going to be there, and they'll say, touch the duck. And maybe they'll touch the puppy, and then the puppy gets smaller and the duck gets bigger, and it says, touch the duck. So this is what errorless learning is all about, giving the person an opportunity to get to the reinforcer, because it's a way of encouraging someone to learn. I absolutely love it. Somebody says, love Camp Discovery. It's so comprehensive. Hey, Maggie, I'm so glad that you dropped in, and you're in the afternoon. We're still in the morning here, but glad that you're here. So in any case, errorless learning, it's a great way for anyone to start teaching. I want you to take a minute and think about something that you would like to learn, And would you like to start the hard way or the easy way? And guess what? They've taken data and people learn faster when we start the easy way. I'm so glad that you're here. So I wanted to, good morning, our Journey Cameron's New Life, and good morning, Maggie. So Amanda said that that this jargon of the day gets recommended for helping to learn things. It's so funny because we started jargon of the day so that we could teach people who weren't going to school for this what people who are going to school learn. And now universities all over the world use our jargon to as study guides. And they give them the added plus of they tell them to go watch as many and to take data on my hair. I just found this out recently that it's like, see in which videos is her hair the craziest. I have a little bit sticking up today. I'm cutting my own hair in COVID. And so it's a little scary. So that's the reinforcer. They're like, oh, in which video does she have the craziest hair? That's the reinforcer for the students, but they're learning, I'll take it. It doesn't matter, right? Yes, I have crazy hair. It just suits my mood. In any case, good morning to Ratana. So glad that you're here. Oh, I'm sending you a big hug. You had a rough night. I'm so sorry. I'm sending you a big hug. You're here. You're safe. It's all going to be okay. Write in if you want to tell us what was going on, but you don't have to if you don't want to. All right, we got to move on to the question of the day. And our question for you today that you can be writing in on any of those big four that were on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, or Twitter. Where is your favorite place to shop? I want to know from you guys, sometimes we have people who will come to us and they'll ask us questions like, what do people in the autism community want? Like for self-advocates, adults who are on the autism spectrum, what's their favorite store? Or for moms who have kids on the spectrum, where's their favorite place to go to shop? Like, people want to know this kind of stuff. You know why? They want to know what your reinforcer is. They want to know what would be exciting to you, what would be fun to win in a contest. And I think that it's something that we should all think about. I have a friend, there's a store out here. I can't even think is it called? Home Goods. That's what it's called. And she calls it her church. She goes to Home Goods on a regular. She's like, if I don't get to church once a week, something's really off. But she's talking about Home Goods. Oh my gosh. And so so the person who had a rough night, they were up from 12 to 5 and then up at 7. Let's talk about this in just a minute. Let's hang on to that. Because I want to talk about when we can't sleep and when our kids can't sleep. So Target, Whole Foods, and IKEA. I got to be in the right mood to be in IKEA. Sometimes it's like the only place on earth that I can possibly be happy. But I got to say, too, it stresses me out sometimes at IKEA because sometimes it's too much. Like if I don't know what I'm there looking for, like the ideal IKEA experience for me is when I know what I'm there looking for, but I have tons of time to shop it for other things. But if I have to go there knowing something that I want and I'm in a hurry, it's not going to be fun for me. And I've gone there before not having something in mind, and it's too much for me. It's a sensory overload. Good morning to Roya, and thank you for you liked the explanation of errorless learning. Wonderful. I just bought my daughter a swing that spins. It's elastic and she loves it. Weighted blanket online. I shop online a lot for my daughter. I only shop online right now. I have not been to a store, physically to a store, since February, the end of February. I think I might have gone into a store on March 2nd, but we had already stopped going to stores before the shutdown. And I literally have not been to a store, but I live in Los Angeles where you can get absolutely anything delivered. And so it's been interesting. I don't think maybe I bought a couple of things online before that, and now everything I order is online. So and I've been sort of amazed. We should do a whole show on like what you can order online, because pretty much everything. It's just, that's not entirely true. There are some things that you can't order online, but now they have services that will go and get them for you, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. So, but don't let me forget, I want to come back to the sleeping at night. Okay. Okay, so, and I'm glad that you like the crazy hair. I took scissors and hacked away at it the other day, and it's always this scary sort of thing where I'm like, oh no. And I think to myself, what does it matter? Like, we're home. What does it possibly matter what my hair looks like? And this will be like at midnight, and I'm cutting my hair, and then I get up in the morning and I go, oh my gosh, I do a live show. People see me every day. I don't know why. I'm like, nobody's going to see me. It doesn't matter. Good morning. My grandson wakes up between 1 and 4 and doesn't go back to sleep for hours. We're lost and don't know what to do. We're going to come back to the sleep issue. That's what we're going to talk about. But let's continue on with our question. We did our question. Let's do our topic for the week. And then let's jump right into sleep, insomnia, and our kids not sleeping. Yes, and somebody's recommending the weighted blanket. Trying something new. This is going to be perfect for what we're going to be talking about, because I'll tell you something. You know what the definition of insanity is? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It's hard though. I mean, that makes it so crystal clear. It's like, well, of course. But it's hard because there's so many variables in life that sometimes we don't know which variable to change. And we don't know, so we get nervous and we just change everything. And sometimes that works, but a lot of times it doesn't, because we can't track data on, and then we're still in the same boat, right? And it just doesn't work. So we're going to be talking about this week. And today, let's talk about it in terms of sleep, getting our kids to sleep, getting them to stay asleep. So more information. I think he just had too much sensory input with 2 stores: haircut, shower, and potty training, and screen reinforcement. Out for potty training was too much input, but sleep would be nice for me. Yeah. And someone else says, LOL, I was just thinking of doing my hair. Yours looks fabulous. I think if you looked up close, you would be frightened. But okay. And somebody gave us a video. I have to do this at home scissor cut. And I have to order new clippers, because I had clippers and I was shaving everyone in the house's head, and the clippers don't work anymore. And I don't know whether that's because there's an insurrection in my home, and the boy people in my home have made it so that my clippers no longer work for themselves. But let's get back to the sleep thing and trying something new. So I think it's really important when, if something goes wrong once, it's like, I love this parent who says, I think I know what this was. I think it was that we tried to do too much in one day, and that it might have been too much. And I think it's great when we start to take a guess, that we go, okay, what were the variables? The other day, our jargon was antecedent. So what was the antecedent that led to not being able to sleep? But I really want to encourage you to not get too concerned or bogged down in that, but to just create an experiment. So, because I would guess that there would be certain days, for instance, think of yourself. Like, there are days when I can go to IKEA and sensory, it's okay for me. And then there are days when I cannot go to IKEA. It's too much for me sensory wise. And I'd like to think that our kids are probably that, like, times 8, that there are some days when it's just not happening, and other days where it maybe could happen a little bit. So I don't want to say that, to you, that there's never going to be a time that your child couldn't do 2 stores and a haircut. You just might have to work up to that. But let's talk a little bit about sleep habits. I just have to, you guys are writing in enough comments. I got to log into the chat so that I can see them after the fact. Because there's a big thing right now about having clean sleep habits, that we set ourselves up for success. It's all about that antecedent kind of thing, and creating basically a ritual. And everybody's ritual is different. But I want to start by talking about when kids won't go to sleep, and then let's move into when they're not staying asleep. And sometimes you're just going to have that random night where your kiddo wakes up in the middle of the night and won't go back to sleep, just like you might have that, right? So one-offs, those are hard. And for the parent who's had the one-off last night, I want to say to you, are there reinforcements? Is there somebody who can help you out today and let you get a 2-hour nap? Because a 2-hour nap gonna make a world of difference for you. It's not gonna change everything, but it would help. And if not, can you, the thing is, you don't want to spend all day being snuggy with the child, because then they're going to have a hard time sleeping tonight. So if you can't get help and support, giving them, sometimes you got to like close off an area in the house so that that they can't get into too much, put on a video that that they love, and then lay on the floor around them so that nothing bad is going to happen and you can doze. He did fine with all, but at night, I think sensory diet might help. Okay, we're going to talk about that. I'm already missing some of the, okay. We're having a discussion about Texas and California. I would just say to you, if you're looking for resources, Texas has a lot of resources, but if you are wanting to have support from the government, what Texas has is not what California has. But it is twice as expensive. Yes. Okay. So, and they say every time we do 2 stores, this happens. Okay. Well, then that's great data for you to know. So maybe 2 stores is too much right now, but in a year, maybe 2 stores won't be too much. But I would also say that maybe if you do 2 stores, maybe you got to add something else in, like we do. I'm a big fan of tiring the kids out, just exhausting them to the point where sleep is the only option there is. Now, can you go too far with that? Yeah, because sometimes a child is so exhausted that they can't get themselves to sleep. But good, clean, fun, like, I always talk here on the show about setting up the obstacle course in your living room and using the couch cushions and everything that's in the laundry basket and everything that's at your disposal, and having them push the furniture into place and then, pull it back. That's all that heavy work that's really good for them. I know we've been doing a lot of yard work because it's a weird time of year here in California where now the leaves have fallen. And, now is the time when you got to clean all that up, and you really have about 2 weeks before everything starts to grow again. And having that outdoor, the sunshine and the fresh air has just been knocking us all out. Trying to build good habits this year, and one of them is focusing on bedtime routine and sticking to that bedtime routine religiously. So it's always the same thing, and we always do the same thing. Good for you. Make sure that you aren't, somebody suggests, make sure that you aren't feeding during those hours that he's awake between 1 and 4. Yeah. So for those of you who are having trouble getting your kiddos to sleep, yes, setting up that ritual, and depending on how old your kiddo is, it can look vastly different. And depending on what sensory is going on with your child. For instance, there are people who every night give their kids a bath, and then they will do a whole lotion rub down massage. And they take lotion and they put Epsom salts into it too, so that it's a detoxifier. You want to make sure that your child during the day is getting plenty to drink if you're going to be using Epsom salts in their, because we don't want them to dry out, right? But there's like a whole ritual. My son, I didn't know about the Epsom salts in the lotion, but he would have a bath every night, and I would do the full massage. He absolutely loved that. I used to say, I want that. I want a nice warm bath, snuggy pajamas, and a full body massage every night. What a wonderful thing. But then, but that wasn't enough to have it work. But we were told sleep hygiene, it has to happen the same time every night. That then the routine has to be the same. We were given a video that I think only exists on the black market anymore, but you can use anything that's like this. It was a video called Nighty Nights, and it showed in the beginning, it's like a 16-minute long video. It's crazy. It's like, it looks ridiculous. I don't know why people can't get it right now, because it's sold like crazy, because it works. But in the beginning, it shows all these animals and they're jumping around, the moms and the babies, and there's the lamb and it's jumping around and doing all this stuff, and there's the baby giraffe, and then the music sort of changes and they all start to wind down, and they all end up snuggling up with their parent, and we watch the animals go to sleep. And there is some crazy magic about it. Although I will tell you that the other thing that they say scientifically is that if someone gets into the breathing pattern of someone sleeping, that they will go to sleep. So if you're, co-sleeping with your baby or a significant other and they're asleep and you match their breath to yours, you will go to sleep. Proven. Boom. Works. So something about children watching animals go to sleep, I don't know whether they mimic their breathing, but they go to sleep. Somebody else said lavender, by the way, is a good thing. You can have scented lotion that has lavender in it, is supposed to be good for sleep too. Yes. Okay, so fine. But then there has to be somehow the transition of, I'm sleepy, to the bed where the person feels safe. And this is where there's so much room for error. Some people like to have the story time in bed so that we don't have to transfer and they can start to go to sleep. And there are lots of theories about, do you read until they go to sleep, or do you leave before they go to sleep so that they know how to put themselves to sleep? I think all of that is really good data and important, except for some of us, we just don't have the option to, go through what you have to go through to teach your child to put them to sleep when they're young and they have autism. Just keeping it real. So just getting them to sleep sometimes is the more important thing. So whatever the ritual is, if you find just the right machination that works, but I think a lot of it is being busy during the day and then having that pattern, the wind down, getting them to sleep. Okay, great. Now, if they really won't stay in bed, really want to encourage you to look at our videos about the bedtime pass. This is a thing, and we had a template for years. I got to see if we still have it. It's like I'm looking around for it. It would be on my computer, but I'm looking around for it. I'm sure that we have it somewhere. But basically, it's this thing that says bedtime pass, and they have tickets, and you can do it with anything. You can do it with playing cards. You can draw them on a piece of paper, laminate it for yourself, but you give your child a certain number of tickets. Let's say that you notice that they get out of bed 3, 4, 5 times a night. So you decide to give them 5 tickets and you say, this is how many times you can get up out of bed. And I know you're thinking, I don't want him to get up out of bed 5 times. Why would I give him 5 passes? Because we want for him or her to see that I can, and that nothing bad will happen. We're gonna titrate them down over a period of time, but we give them 5 passes. Plus, what you will see is that when anxiety is a part of it, when a child is getting up out of bed because of anxiety, they will hoard the passes. This works. So you say to your child, here are your passes. You put them on the bedside table next to the bed or on the floor next to the bed, whatever works. And, at first they're going to be like, I don't know what that means. But if they get up, you go, oh, okay, I got to take one of them away. Thank you. And then you take it and you put it inside your shirt, or you put it in the drawer or wherever you go. Okay, that one's gone. Thank you. No recriminations for getting up. Oh, good. You gave me your bedtime pass. And you don't feel about anything. You don't give them anything to drink. You don't give them a toy. You don't play with them. You just, are very loving and quiet. And you go, okay, great. Give me your pass. And now we go back to bed. You rub their back and you stay 30 seconds being very quiet, and you go away. They get up and you go, oh, okay. No, thank you. Now I get the other pass. And they will notice I'm out of them. And if they get out of the 5 passes, then, your interaction with them is now completely gone, flat affect. And if they get up, you just motor them back to bed. You don't even stay a second. There's no discussion, no recriminations. Okay. The other part of this that's really helpful for a lot of families is that if you can get them to a night where they stay in bed and they've got at least 1 pass, they get to turn it in for a big something, whatever you want to make it be for that child, right? So that really I'm telling you, like within 10 days, your child will be staying in bed and not using the bedtime passes because they'll be hoarding them. And then you very gradually take one pass away at a time and see if they're successful. And, you know, you get down to the point where they get one bedtime pass. That's it. But hear me say that when they get up, we don't turn lights on. There's nothing to drink. There's nothing to eat. There's no playtime. See a screen. And we are not entertaining. We are the most boring people that we can possibly be. We are not angry. We do not say, stop getting out of bed, like, because that's entertainment. That's theater in the middle of the night. So we are as possible. So you do that. Now, if you've got a kiddo who's up and will not go back to sleep, then it's really important that you have something that keeps them in bed and helps them to feel safe. Now, it could be that they've got a certain blankie or a pillow that is their thing. They also make these great night lights. I love, there's a toy company called Uncle Milton Toys. You can Google them, and they have a series of night lights. We got the moon in my room, which I absolutely loved. And it's 3D shaped. It's just round, but it's 3D shaped and has the face of the moon on it. And then it has a little remote clicker that can make the moon in the different phases. So it could be waxing, gibbous, whatever, full moon. And it's on a timer, and eventually it turns off. So we have to set up some rules. And by the way, they have everything else under the sun too. They have Jake the Pirate, Dora the Explorer. They have flowers. They have ones that make ocean sounds and put like lights that, make it look like the surface of the ocean in the room. All on timers, all with a little clicker that we make the concession that that's the one thing, but you may only have that if you are in your bed. And when you are in your bed, you get to have that and you can be playing with that. Because if we minimize what they can be playing with, then eventually they're either going to stay awake or go to sleep, but you get to continue sleeping. Now, if we're doing that method, we have to make sure that the child is safe, that the child cannot get outside, that you can sleep comfortably knowing that there is nothing that they can do to harm themselves, but they've got their clicker, they're in bed, and you are not interacting, right? There can be no interaction, because if there is interaction, then I learn, well, it's more fun in the middle of the night. I get mom's undivided attention. And it's cozy and it's warm and it's all the things that I want. So why wouldn't I be awake for that, right? So we got to keep all that, the one and only reinforcer is the thing that I only get when I'm in the bed. And as I said, it could be a fuzzy or it can be a light, but it should be one thing, right? Okay. And somebody's asking a question that's nothing to do with sleep. I'll get to that in just a second. But so super important that we do that and that we reinforce them in the morning if they've stayed in their bed, slept. And if they did not sleep, the routine of the day. Now, it's going to be miserable because they're going to be tired and they're going to want to go to sleep and they're going to be cranky. We make sure that their food is of the highest quality and that they eat on the regular intervals so that we don't add low blood sugar to the day, but we are going to wear their tuchuses out and not let them take a nap. They're going to want to take a nap and it's going to be really stinking hard, but it's once they've been up all night, it's important that we get them back on track and back into that circadian rhythm. So, you have a sun and the moon clock. It helps them know when it's okay to wake up and when it's time to go to sleep. I love that. I haven't seen that. Okay, you guys wrote in a bunch. I got to go back here. So we're having the big debate about California or Texas. I love both states, but I'm just going to tell you that Texas has a grant situation that I was saying the other day that they need to be taken out behind the barn. It's just not a good grant. And they say, oh, it's so great because they give families like 2 hours a week of ABA. There's no study ever that shows that that's going to help anybody. All it does is teases people into thinking that they're helping their child. It makes me furious. But ask me how I really feel. If you have health insurance, really good health insurance, Texas is great. Texas is absolutely wonderful, and there's more and more services coming to Texas. But if you don't have through your employer and you're relatively sure that your employer is going to keep that health insurance, I'm so far behind in the comments. My daughter was diagnosed with PDD. It's been a long road, but as long as you stick to it and staying on top of therapies like speech and occupational research, and observe your child and take notes, it helped us. Absolutely. But I just want to, I'm just always going to talk here about ABA. And I know that back in the, I'm not hearing people getting a PDD NOS diagnosis anymore, which is making me really happy. The problem is that now we're having kids either get the diagnosis of autism or they're not getting a diagnosis at all. Sometimes they're getting a sensory processing disorder. But pretty much you can argue, even if they have a diagnosis of ADD, you can argue now that ABA is the therapy that would be good for them. And if you can get a doctor to write the prescription, you're good. Has anyone seen the Northwestern Mutual commercial where the mom starts the soap company? We do love that. And I have looked to see if I could have her on the show, but I can't find that real person. If you're having trouble with speech, having two magnets that say yes and no, you can hand your child the magnet that answers their question. That helped my daughter with her speech. Sorry, this has nothing to do with sleep. That's okay. Yes. And we have messages about don't give up. Baby Einstein sleeping DVDs and CDs help my daughter. And Jewel has a lullaby CD that's wonderful. We sang to my son a lot. And to this day, if he is having trouble sleeping, all I have to do is say, would you like me to read to you? I can read that boy to sleep in 3 pages. I'm just saying. And there's a trick to it. If any of you have listened to Calm or Headspace for their sleep stories, I love them. And it's exactly what I did for years to put my son to sleep. And sorry, I'm just choking. So when you're reading to your child and you want to read to your child, you make it very interactive and you have them touch things and whatever. But when you're reading to your child to have them go to sleep, you read and you lower your voice and you draw out all of your vowels. And everything is a downward inflection. I love there's the one sleep story that I've listened to a bunch of times, and it's the person who's like, they describe the field of blue lavender plants. they pause between each word. And, you just read to your child. Trust me, they'll go to sleep. You'll be lucky if you don't fall asleep reading to them. And they're making a whole business out of this on apps now to talk adults to sleep, but it works for the kids too. And it can be their favorite storybook. You just read it in a slightly different way. Okay, he scripts, so it's hard for me to ignore him when he wakes up. Okay, well, I would tell you that we have to make the condition that, first of all, I would be trying during the day to teach him how to script softly. Have you ever seen, there's a thing that people do, if you go to a hardware store and you get PVC pipe pieces, you need one piece that's about this long, and then you need 2 elbows, and it makes a phone. Right? So you put an elbow on one end, an elbow on the other end, and it looks like a play phone, right? But you hold it up to your child's ear and you have them talk into it. And what they can do is they can hear themselves talking. And then we teach them, how we talk softly. And we put it up against, and we whisper, right? And then we reinforce that's some people say that's our whisper voice. Some people call that the indoor voice, whatever, the quiet voice, whatever. But he needs to be able to hear it. A lot of times our kids don't hear themselves. There's something magical about that PVC pipe, and they hear themselves and they can hear volume. And if they're really not hearing it, then you twist the pipe so that the elbow is facing one way and you talk in the other, and then you say something a little bit louder. And then you say, now I'm going to say soft. This is my soft voice. And then you have them try it so that he learns this is my soft voice. And at night, we use our soft voice so that he can be talking and doing his scripting while he's playing with it on the thing, but it's not keeping you awake. Let me know what you think about that. Okay, and how we stop self-reinforced scripting. This is really hard. That's one of the hardest things that there is. But the first thing that we do is we need to make them aware of the fact that they're doing that. We also need to give them a replacement behavior. I will tell you that my son used to do this. He made noises, though he didn't say sounds. And it took years. It took years. I don't want to scare you, but it took years. But it took years so that he could begin to understand a whole bunch of different things. One of them, he had to understand perception of himself and perception of other people. It wasn't until he got that he understood why him scripting wasn't going to work for other people. So the thing that once he had a bunch of things and that in there, there was a day where our autism whisperer, Peter Farrig, said to him, you're making this noise. And because he would over and over and over again. And he said, can you make that noise in your head? And he did it in a very simple way. He said, I'm going to make the noise. He said, now I'm not going to make the noise so that you can hear it, but I'm going to make it in my head so that I can hear it. And he sat there and he said, yep, I can hear it in my head. And then he said to Jem, now you try it. And my son did it. And he said, did you make the noise in your head? And he said, yeah. And he said, I couldn't hear it. Good job. And so it was like, my son was like, you mean I can do it then? And it doesn't bother anybody. And my friends won't say, what's that noise? I can still do it. And we said, yeah. And he was like, great. And then if he started to make the noise around any of us, we would say, can you make the noise in your head? And it was like a switch that he could switch. And it's very rare that I hear him make a noise anymore. And now it's like a thing I delight in, because I know that it means that he's like that happy that he forgot for a second. If that makes sense. So, but I will tell you, there's a lot of things you have to have in place before you can do that. Somebody's applying for their RBT exam today. I'm so excited. Yeah, calm is so boring. I think that calm is really for adults because it's so boring. I went to sleep trying to figure out what they were talking about. It definitely works. There's the one where they describe the spices on the shelf, because they have some that are free and some that you have to pay for. And there's the one where she describes the spices on the shelf. Holy business, put me to sleep. And good luck to our person taking the RBT. So we absolutely love that. Absolutely love that you're taking your RBT today. All right, we are unbelievably out of time. I don't know where the time has gone, and I feel like there was something else I promised that I was going to talk about. And the time has run out. But let me tell you we got 30 seconds. Let me tell you a little bit about, let me tell you a little bit about what's happening this week. This week on the show, tomorrow, Temple Grandin, we're doing one of our best of episodes of Temple Grandin. Then on Wednesday, on Inauguration Day, we have Dr. Grampichet here, and she's going to be answering your questions, not about inauguration, but about autism and everything related to autism. So that will be on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we've got a fabulous woman who's going to be here with us. She's a realtor who knows a great deal about autism and autism-friendly design for homes, how we set up our homes to be of benefit to our kids on the autism spectrum. I'm really excited to talk to her. And then on Friday, we have Leah Hirschfeld going to be joining Nancy and I for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. She's going to be giving us the lowdown on some of the latest research on access to services, who's getting them, who's not, why, and what we can all be doing to help ensure that more people are getting access to services. So that's how the week is breaking down, and we're super excited about it. And yes, everybody's saying good luck on the BCBA. Somebody says my daughter has a signature sound that she does when she gets excited. And there we go. I love this advice that Amanda has said. When you take your test, replace all the names they give you with names that you know. And I think this is really true too. I took my, I took the BCAT. I guess I took the RBT test. I took the BCAT test. And when I did it, sometimes I would read the question and I would get all thrown off, and I would go, wait a second. Okay, so let me think about Jem or, one of the 18 million children I know on the spectrum, and picture them doing this. And then it was like the answer, all the clouds would clear and I would know the answers. So absolutely think about the people that you know. It'll make much more sense. All right. Blessings to all of you. We will be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from different places in Southern California this morning. So thrilled to be here with you. I've got to start with a programming note that we've had all kinds of things going on here. And we last minute made the decision to not do a live show yesterday morning. And I apologize, because normally we have Dr. Doreen Grampiche and she sends her regrets. She was under the weather, and it was also a strategic decision that we felt that a lot of you wanted to be watching the inauguration, and it was worth watching. Oh my gosh. We have to talk about this lovely young woman whose name escapes me, but if you did not get a chance to see the poet laureate speak, you need to. I don't care what your politics are, you need to set that aside and go listen to this young woman speak. I had heard a little bit about her beforehand, but when she stepped up to that microphone and she was wearing this gorgeous yellow coat with this red tiara thing in her hair and some jewels in her hair. And I was like, oh, get ready, world. Because I thought she was a child, because I had heard that she was the first youth poet laureate, but that had been a couple of years ago. She's 22. She's not a youth. She's an adult woman. But yes, John is saying she was amazing. So here's the piece that I did not know when I was watching her, but I've heard so many reports last night. This was a special needs student. Yes, my friends. This precious young woman was born premature. Yes, Amanda Gorman. Thank you. Thank you, Traven. I'm so bad with names. Amanda Gorman. Look her up, you guys. Amazing. She was born premature and had learning disabilities, and then later had a speech impediment. If you look at some of her earlier interviews, you will see that she's worked very hard. She has what we call in the speech world a baby R. And I was not detecting it when she was on the podium yesterday. But in her earlier interviews, because I used to do, eradication of dialects, not speech therapy, but eradication of dialects and helping with placement for different things when I taught college, and because I taught voice and diction, among other things. So I'm a little bit familiar with those. So she has what we call a tiny R, a baby R in some contexts, but she's worked tirelessly to correct that, because she said, I was not going to let that stand in the way of me speaking my truth. Woo! Oh my goodness. And she plans on running for president. I think they said in 2032. And where can I sign up to vote now? Oh my goodness, this young woman. And of course, there were so many other things about this inauguration. When they swore in Kamala Harris, I sobbed, the ugly sob, and tears and hysteria. My husband had I was screaming. It would happen earlier than I thought it was going to happen. And I was screaming, saying it's happening. And because here in California, it was on the earlier side. My husband came running downstairs and he's like, what's going? We thought that it was happening at 9 o'clock straight up. And it didn't. It was all over by 9 o'clock straight up. So I was screaming and yelling, and my husband came running downstairs, and I was sobbing, and I fell into his arms. I mean, it's a big deal for so many different reasons, right? But I just kept sobbing and saying, I wish my mother were alive to see this. In any case, I thought that was going to be the pinnacle of the whole thing. No, stop. Amanda Goring was the pinnacle of the entire thing. And John is saying, she said this morning that 3 years ago, she would not have been able to give that poem. And I think she is a rising star. She's already a star, but she's going to go much further. So if you missed it, you must go back and watch it, and then watch earlier interviews with her, or everybody's going to want her to be on their show to talk. You're going to see a lot of her in the coming days because she's phenomenal. So in any case, we didn't do the live show yesterday, and so I apologize, and I don't have an expert here for you today, but somebody had written in a question that we were going to address yesterday, and we are going to address it here from the perspective of caregiver, because, I always say to you, we have lots of experts on the show, but I'm not one of them. I do say, though, that I've been in the trenches on this for a long time, and I've learned a thing or two and can connect people to other things. So I'm going to try to do that for this parent that's written in just a few minutes. But and we're going to take all of your questions and have many discussions about many things here. But I'm excited to be here with you today because I think we're going to see a lot of things happening over the next couple of days. And I, for one, am very interested to see what happens in the education arena. And I'm very excited to see what happens in terms of our special needs community. I can tell you that a few years ago, there was a large group of people who had been put together to write policy agenda and recommendations, not actual policy, but recommendations to then candidate Hillary Clinton. So that, because she would always say, I am ready to take office day one, and I have plans starting in day one. Because she, for the 18 months before the election, had this group of people, all volunteers, luminaries from all aspects of, and I know that was just one committee, that was the special needs, different abilities committee. And I know that she had them for lots of other things. And I happen to be one of the people who served on, I was on the education committee, and we were looking at the IEP process and the 504 process and IDEA and fully funding IDEA. And ultimately, our recommendations were that, we can make all the plans in the world, but if you don't fully fund IDEA, you're not going to be able to implement any of these things. We were making that recommendation to, as I said, then candidate Hillary Clinton. And then when she didn't win, I have to tell you, it was very personal for me. I will also say that my very dear friend who passed away last June, Joanne Lara, served on the employment committee that was helping, and Hillary Clinton, before the election, rolled out her plan for employment for autism, which my friend Joanne Lara, you can see her living and breathing in that document and that policy that Hillary Clinton put forward. So it was such a loss when Hillary Clinton didn't win, because we thought of all that work that wasn't going to happen. But over the last 4 years, that work was maintained. I chose not to continue on the committee. Joanne was ill, and both she and I said we have other things that we have to work on right now. And subsequently, she passed away. But I know that all of that work has continued. And I know that candidate Biden said that he was going to be the first president to fully fund IDEA. If that happens, we will alert the media, and I will alert you, because that is something that would be a game changer for our community. Again, I want to say this is not about politics and partisanship. We try to look at everybody's policy and comment on it here. I'm just telling you what I know in terms of what this particular candidate has said and the policies and the people who have been advising him. If he does what he says he was going to do, it will be the first time ever that IDEA, since its inception, has been fully funded, which means that there's a real possibility that when you go to the 504 or the IEP meeting, you won't have to be fighting for something because of the cost of it. Because what has happened over the last 20 whatever years since IDEA was put into place, I guess it's 30, almost 30 years, is that the school knows that they cannot fully fund it. They didn't, it's like saying to somebody, well, I want you to put in a new lawn, and a lawn costs $5,000, but I'm only going to give you $1,300. And so now you got to figure out, do I just do part of the lawn? Do I do all of the lawn, but I go with a lesser grade of grass that isn't going to, work? Do I try to do some of the work myself? Or, what do I do? Schools have had to rob Peter to pay Paul. And it's why you find yourself in an IEP fighting for services. And you ask yourself, why am I having to fight for this? This is federally mandated that my child deserves this. Why are you giving me a hard time? Because they know they can't fund it. And it's really shame on every politician for not fully funding IDEA, for putting the policy forward and saying, yes, this is what we think is right, but then we're not going to give you the money for it. So we'll see. I don't know. But that was one of his campaign promises, that it was that he would fully fund IDEA. That, again, I will alert you if that happens. Okay, so I've gotten a little far afield, but I had to talk about the Amanda Goring thing for a second because she was delightful. And a real testament to our kids and how people can overcome challenges. So, so delightful. All right, we are live, and it is Tuesday, it's Thursday. It's not Tuesday. It's Thursday, the 21st of January, 2021. And so you guys can be writing in your comments. We have lots of different ways for you to interact. We are live right now on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, and Twitter. And you can write in on any of those platforms, as many of you already have. Hello, Helen, and hello, Amanda, and hello, John. Write in on any of those platforms. It pops up on my screen almost in real time. And you can feel free to write in your comment, your question. Helen has said that fully funding IDEA would be excellent. And I agree with you, Helen. I'm like right there with you. It's the right thing to do. Let's hope that it happens. I'm hoping that since our First Lady is a lifelong school teacher, who's still working and still in the classroom, I'm hoping that she's going to be there to fight for all of our teachers and for all of our kids. So let's hope. But Traven is showing you all the places that you can watch this show when it's not live. So we podcast, we record the whole show, and it podcasts on all those platforms that I was just saying, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, and Twitter. You can find the whole show there. And then the whole show is podcast to every place that carries podcasts for free. We are a free download on iTunes, Apple Music, Google, Spotify, all Deezer, all those places. We're free. Now, if you watch the show, you'll see that when we have a guest on the show, later we will cut just that interview with that guest and put it on our YouTube channel. And the reason why we do that is that we cover so much ground in a show that it's hard to tell you all the different things, so that when you're searching for it, to be able to find all the things that we're talking about is really hard, right? So we will cut the interviews out as highlights, and then what Traven does so beautifully is that he'll put like the name of the guest and the topic that they're talking about, so that if you want to go to our homepage, autism-live.com, or to our YouTube channel, you can put keywords in. If you don't know the name of the guest, but you know that they were, for instance, talking about pandas, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, you could just put pandas in, and it will show you all of the interview clips that we've done about pandas. So that's why we do what we do. But that's only on our homepage and on YouTube. Every place else, it's the whole show. So I hope that you will search our site to find the information that you want. And there's lots of different ways on our site. Like if you know a topic, like some of you just like the jargon of the day, and I get it. We're going to do it in just a minute. And so we have a channel on our homepage and on our YouTube channel that's just the jargon of the day. And you can go there and see all of the videos for jargon of the day. If you just like the recipes, because normally we carry a lot of recipes, we haven't been doing it in COVID as much because we can't be filming, but we have a whole playlist of fabulous recipes for you that are allergy friendly and different autism diet friendly. It's a whole playlist about that, right? But you can also, we have the Ask Dr. Doreen's. You can search those by topic, and you can just, like, you can put in toilet training, and it'll show you every question that's been asked about toilet training, and you can click the one that you want, because toilet training is pretty broad, right? And, you know, the question that you have may have already been answered. So there we go. But thrilled that we have an opportunity to bring that to you guys free of charge. It's really important to us. Our mission here is to provide information and inspiration to the larger autism community. And I always remind you that we are all about that larger autism community, which starts, of course, with people who are on the spectrum. They are the heart of everything we do, right? But we also include in our discussion and topics everyone who loves those individuals, because we feel that if we can empower that entire group to be able to get to the resources and the respect and the funding and all of that stuff, that we will be being of better service. Good morning to Avani. So thrilled that you're here. Okay, so I do remind you, I'm not an expert, but, you know, I have an opinion. I guess I have an informed opinion after 13 years of covering autism. And I think we decided it was 16 years that since my son was diagnosed with autism. Yeah, something like that. I don't know. I'm bad at the math, but it's just an informed opinion. I'm not an expert in autism. I'm not really an expert in anything. Like, certainly not an expert in floor tiles. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. That's just what popped into my head. All right. We do like to start the show on Thursdays with, and thank you. I see a question coming in. I'm going to get to that in just a second. We do like to start the show on Thursdays with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani nani are the experts talking about? What does this have to do with us? Why would we do this? You know, why do I have to be in a place where I have to learn these things? I will be honest with you, for years, you know, after my son was diagnosed, I was just so angry and resentful about the jargon. I just felt like, why do I, on top of everything else we have to go through, why do I have to learn this stupid stuff? It didn't, you know, I was just angry at it. And then I kind of rounded the corner and said, well, maybe it would help if I learned it. And it did. It did. So I was so overwhelmed by it, but that's why we do jargon. First, we give you the term. Then I give you the actual definition of it. Then, whenever possible, filled with resentment and bitterness, I make fun of the actual definition because it's often useless. And then we give you a working definition, which is also often worthless. But then I try to give you an example, and hopefully that's not worthless. So sometimes it is, though. But I just want to caution you, first time, don't sweat it. We go back over all of these terms every so often, and you will get it. I promise you, you will get it, because sometimes it just takes the experience of seeing it in action before you go, oh, that's what it is. Okay, now I get it, right? So here we go. Here is our jargon term, mass trial. Doesn't it sound like, you know, a bunch of people on trial? Like it's the trial of the Chicago 7, right? I just remember they would talk about, well, we'll mass trial it. And I was like, what does that mean? Are you going to take a bunch of children and you're going to try it before you try it with my son? What does that mean? I didn't understand it for at least the first year of ABA. So let's destigmatize this. It has nothing to do with going to court. It has nothing to do with lots of children. It's more about lots of targets. So let's take a look at what our actual definition of mass trial. Mass trial is repeated consecutive trials of the same SD and target. Okay. If you don't know what a trial is, then this is of no use to you. If you don't know what an SD is, this is of no use to you. I think we all know what a target is, but I think of a bullseye, nothing that I want to associate with my child, right? So almost useless, right? And it's so short. You're like, I want to understand it, but what in the heck does that mean? So let's take a look at our working definition and see if we can't make heads nor tails of this. So getting your child or the individual to demonstrate exactly the same target behaviors. So I said this is about lots of different exemplars or targets or lessons, right? It is, but doing them one at a time. So I want to learn something that I don't know. Let's say that I'm learning Russian, and it's a language that I don't speak. And I want to know, I want to be fluent in Russian, right? Because in a lot of cases, we are teaching our children the English language and we want them to be fluent in it. And by the way, fluency, I think a lot of people think, oh, well, you're talking about being vocally verbal. Not necessarily. There's a lot of different ways that we communicate, and we want all of our individuals, whether they're children, teens, or adults, we want them to have functional communication. Well, functional communication means that I understand everything that you're saying, and verbal behavior is more than just vocal. So, I don't understand hand signals. I hate it when I'm in a parking lot and they're like, and I'm like, what does that mean? And I have to roll down the window and go, what are you saying? I want to go to one of those SEAL camps where they teach this and that and what that means, that I'm looking at you and we want two people to go around. Even when I'm watching a movie, I'm like, what does that mean? I don't get it. I don't get gestures. That's my particular thing, right? We want people to understand gestures within reason, right? If we're doing sign, we really want them to understand gestures. We want for people to receptively hear things and understand them. And we want them to be able to express. Now that, we'd love to have that be vocal. Can't always get that, but a lot of times we can. But there's much more to expressing yourself than just being vocal. We want them to make a face when they're thinking and feeling something. Don't you have a hard time reading people who have a very flat affect, that they're the king of that, and they have the prosody that where they're everything they say is on the same level. The king of that is what is Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Bueller, and then he does those Visine commercials, and he's like, if you want to have if you want to stop having dry eye, and it's hard to tell whether he's making fun of it or not, because he has a very flat affect. There's no facial expression, and he says it all monotone. We want to help people to understand everything. So getting back to, there's a lot of things to teach. We can't teach them all at the same time. So there's two different techniques that we will hear therapists and our BCBAs talking about. We're going to give the other one on Monday, I think. So there's mass trial and random rotation. Today we're talking about mass trial. So if they say to you, well, we're going to mass trial pen, then what that means, the other day we talked about errorless learning and that we would only have the pen and we would say touch pen. So mass trial is where we have the same thing that we want them to learn. So if the thing that I wanted you to learn was touch pen, then we would have you touch the pen and only the pen. The difference between mass trial and errorless learning is that I may eventually put, the pen with other things. Like I could have the water bottle here, and I'm not teaching water bottle. I'm just saying touch the pen, and the individual touches the pen, and I go, great job. And now I've got my essential oil here. You can't really see it, but now I've got the three things, and I say touch pen. And and I can help the child with errorless learning by guiding their hand over and helping hand over hand very gently, having them touch the pen. And I go, woohoo, you did it. But the thing that I'm not doing is I'm not teaching the difference between pen and water. Later on, I'm going to random rotate. And sometimes I'm going to say touch pen and sometimes I'm going to say water. Now, it all looks ridiculous. And when you see a videotape of somebody teaching an individual this way, you go, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I just want to point out to you, when you're seeing it, it is like the smallest little phase of the beginning of teaching. Let me go back to my example about learning Russian. If I'm trying to learn Russian, we say that immersive language is the best possible thing. Yes, that's true, because I'm going to be flooded with it, but it's important that it be as specific as possible for me to learn it quickly. This is what a lot of those Rosetta Stone and places like that have capitalized on. But because if I go to Russia, I'm getting immersive, but somebody said, I don't speak Russian, but they say a whole stream of thing and pen is one of the words in it. It's going to take me so long to learn which one is the pen. If I'm motivated and if I'm really wanting to learn Russian and really want to know what the pen is, I'm going to figure it out, right? But I got to be super motivated. It would be much easier for me to learn pen if somebody was saying to me, whatever the Russian word is for pen, and they said it a bunch of different times, and then I got to hear it in the sentence. I would really pick it up fast. Well, that's exactly what ABA does. So that but notice that they would say pen to me a bunch of different times, but then I would quickly go and have it in the real world. That's what really good ABA does, is it will give me so that I go, oh, okay, what this is the pen, but then we're going to put it into real life and we're going to go play a game. And while we're playing the game, somebody's going to say, hand me the pen. We're going to put it into real life as soon as possible. Magical pens, Samar says. Yeah. So in any case, so that mass trial just means that I don't know why that's the term for it, because it sounds like we're sending everybody on a death march. We're not. It just means taking one exemplar, one target. I'm trying to teach pen, and I'm going to teach pen until I'm 100% sure that we get it. And I'll tell you the trick here is that then they'll move on to something else. So for instance, pen is a bad example. Let's say I'm trying to teach colors. I don't teach all the colors at once. I start out and maybe I teach red. Right? Red's a pretty good one because it's a, pretty blue. Sometimes they start with blue. We like words that are short and kind of easy to hear and easy to identify. So maybe I start with blue and I teach the color blue. I'm not teaching red at the same time. I put the card there and I say, touch blue. Yay, that's blue, right? Errorless learning. Then I put a red card and a yellow card there and I say, touch blue. Now I've got distractors there, but I'm not teaching those yet. So I teach blue and I rearrange them, and blue, and I do it 2-dimensional and I do it 3-dimensional, and I teach different, things, put it in different areas. We teach blue, blue, blue. And if the child is consistently getting it right, great. Now that's mass trialing. I'm only teaching blue. Then I mass trial red. Now, blue is there, but I'm not teaching blue right now. So I say to the child, touch red. Now, the child's going to go to touch blue, and I don't chastise them. I just move their hand over and go, there's red. Yay, you got it right. Errorless learning, right? But I'm teaching red, and I'll rearrange them, touch red. Boom, they got the red. Fabulous. And I'll keep doing red. Eventually, I get to the point where I have sufficiently mass trialed red. I've sufficiently mass trialed blue. And now I'm really going to move into the discriminative phase of DTT, discriminative trial teaching. And I'm going to have the red one and the blue one there. And I'm going to say, touch red. And the child is going to begin to see, I see this one means red and this one means blue. And the language starts to seep in. That's how we teach. Now, it's a phase. It's like this long, because very quickly, it's just like when Helen Keller was being taught to communicate, that it takes a lot of time to teach the first two. You got to put the time in, you got to put the energy in. And the third one still takes a little bit more time, but once the child gets it, I get it. So when you say blah, blah, it means this color. Okay, game on. Now I'm with you. And they've learned. And when I get it right, you reinforce me and my life is good, and they become a sponge. This is how it works. But that phase of teaching, super short. And then we take it and put it in the real world. Now we're in the car and we go, I spy something green. After we've taught green, or what color is the street light? It's red. And I reinforce, and we have that be in the real world. That's when it gets really exciting. But that beginning phase, where we're errorless teaching and we're doing mass trialing, just because it looks funny, don't discount it. It's the basis upon which we're able to get to that moment where they go, I get it. This one's red and this one's blue. And that's the beginning of everything. So don't give up on that. It works. The science is in, it absolutely works. Okay, moving on. We always have a question of the day for you. And our question today is, it's not mass trial. It's coming. It is, where do you feel the safest? I'm so glad that this is the question today, because it's going to fit right in with what we're talking about, and I didn't even plan it that way. So think about that for a second for you, and feel free to write in, where do you feel the safest? Is it in your car? Is it in your home? Is it in your office? Is it in your bed? Is it in your shower? Is it in your kitchen? Where do you feel the safest? And why? Why do you feel safe there? I have to say, I love being home. I don't know that it's where I feel safest anymore, but for me, it's less about location as it is with people. I feel safest when I am with my husband and my child. If we're a little three, and when we're together, I'm like, well, whatever comes, we're together. Do you know what I mean? And if that meant that we were in a car in a flood, I'd rather be together. That's where I feel the safest. Now, if I, had to choose where we would be, I would choose for us to be at home. Sometimes in the last year, that has not necessarily felt totally safe. We live in a place where, when there was rioting, the CVS around the corner from us was one of the ones that was burned down. So there were moments when just being at home and just being with my family didn't feel entirely safe, but I would choose being with them over anything, and I would choose being at home. So what about you guys? Where do you feel the safest? Because it's going to feed into what we're going to talk about. And our topic for this week, our overreaching topic this week, the topic of the week is trying something new. And part of why this goes together with the question is that sometimes our kids and teens and adults on the spectrum, and those of you who are watching who are on the spectrum, please weigh in and tell me if I'm speaking truth or not. There's a certain amount of anxiety. It's part of the ritualistic behavior. I think we all do ritualistic behavior to a certain extent, but it can be something that gets out of control, ritualistic behavior. That for those of us who have OCD, it can be the thing where we have to check the stove 5 times or check the lock 5 times on the door, right? And that what that is needing to feel safe. And that sometimes that makes it very hard for us to try something new because it doesn't feel safe. And I think it's super important that we understand that and have a respect for that. That when our kids are filled with fear, that we not just poo-poo that. I know people who are like, well, you just got to force them to do it. And then I know other people who are like, well, we're not making them do anything because they feel uncomfortable. And I would like to propose that there is middle ground. That it's important that we stretch people and not leave them confined to a very small place because of anxiety, but that we not throw people into the deep end of the pool. I would like to suggest that there's something in the middle for us and for our children and for our teen children and our adult children, that we find that happy place. And sometimes you're going to step on one side or the other. Sometimes you're going to do something and you go, I pushed him too hard. Or sometimes you're going to go, oh, I should have pushed a little harder, right? I don't think that there's a magic formula to hit it out of the park every single time. But I think if we have awareness and respect for the individual, I think we will always do something better. And by the way, I think it's important to do that for us. Sometimes we get into a rigid thing where we go, I'm doing this. But it's important to check every once in a while and go, is that working? And who's that working for? I always give the example about when a plane takes off from Los Angeles and it goes to New York. Do you know that over half the time it's off course? Because the wind buffets it here and buffets it there, or they need to go around this storm or whatever. But the pilot is always checking in with the radio towers and adjusting course, always, so that they end up in New York. How often does a plane take off from Los Angeles to New York and say, we're going to New York, and they go, oh, we went to South Carolina instead? It doesn't happen because they keep making course corrections because they see, I want to go to New York. How do I get there? And I think it's really important for all of us in our lives to be making course corrections and to notice, is what I'm doing working? And to not be afraid to try something new. That doesn't mean throwing everything out. I'm queen of that, going, well, this isn't working, so let's try, let's move, let's sell everything. That's my instinct always. But that isn't effective either. It's knowing, that you can change incrementally things and have things get better. Trying something new. Okay, so I've got this other question that I want to address, but I want to start with what was written in here live. 4-year-old grandson with autism starting to hit grandma, father, grandfather, acting aggressive towards twin 5-month-old brothers. Okay, so let's start there and let's talk about what's on board first of all. That it sounds like, so if they've got twin 5-month-old brothers, is this the first time that this 4-year-old is a brother? Or are there other siblings, older or younger? And if you can write in and tell me. By the way, saying good morning to Dionysus, actually saying good afternoon, and saying hi to Alexis, who says the new vice president went to my high school a few years after me. That's super cool. But for the granddad who's writing in, here's what I'm wondering. Imagine, let's go back to our question about what makes you feel safe and where do you feel safe? And what is my world like? First brothers, yeah. So what is my world? Because I love Dr. Gramsci always says to us, it always has to be fair and it always has to be just. So we have to do big perspective taking and put ourselves into a 4-year-old body. A 4-year-old body who probably, if he's got an autism diagnosis, there is a deficit in communication, which means that his ability to take in information, communication might be hampered, and his ability to express what he's feeling and thinking and needs might be. And it might be that both of them are equally, at a deficit, or one might be more than the other. But let's all for a moment be a 4-year-old. Neurotypical or otherwise. What's my world like? What are my big things as a 4-year-old? What do I enjoy? What makes me feel safe? What do I want more than anything else? And I think we can all agree that most 4-year-olds, it's not a one size fits all, but most 4-year-olds are still very in tune with one or both of their parents. They, they're going to feel safe with their parents. And, they like to play. And they like their toys, right? Now, that may not describe him. He might be slightly different. But I think it's safe to say that if you are a 4-year-old and you're an only child, then you're the star of the show. It's all about you. and there's nobody else. And for most 4-year-olds on the spectrum, not on the spectrum, they cannot yet have the ability to perspective take to go, oh, I guess it's not about me anymore, right? It's me. I am the star of the show. So what happens when we bring in not one but two baby brothers? And now it is no longer all about me. It is no longer, I'm no longer the star of the show. Used to be that I could, go and somebody would make me some lemonade. And now everybody's busy and everybody's oohing and ahhing over these little things that I don't really understand and I didn't order. And I think we can begin to see where they're, because we're always looking for the antecedent, the what happened before. So when a kid starts hitting, suddenly we always go, what changed? And it feels like to me that a lot probably changed when we brought two new baby brothers in. And maybe he did okay for a little while because maybe everybody fussed over him and said, you're a big brother now. And maybe he liked the smell of the babies for a while, but he thought they were going away. Like, he didn't know. It was like, oh, this is going to be around forever. And no longer, I'm not going to be the cute one anymore. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But I think at this point, when hitting starts to happen, we have to look at it as communication and we have to act quickly. We have to get some experts in there. If this 4-year-old has not yet started early intensive ABA, this is really key for him right now. And if there is a BCBA already on the case, I would call them up and ask for an emergency meeting and saying because here's what happens with hitting. Hitting is a way of communicating, and we always talk about the 4 usual suspects. There's 4 main reasons why anyone does anything repeatedly that's challenging behavior. And one is to get attention. So he might be hitting to get attention. One is to gain access to someone or something. Like, I want mom to talk to me and she's talking to the babies. So I'm going to hit so that now mom will be yelling at me and that's me having mom's attention, right? And I've got mom all to myself. She takes me to the bedroom and says, you can't do that. Well, I got exactly what I wanted, me talking to mom away from the babies. Another is to get, challenging behavior can happen to escape something. And, the sound of the baby's crying could be something that's sensory for him, or the sound of the baby's cooing could be something sensory for him. So he could be hitting so that he gets removed from the babies. If I hit the babies, they remove me from the babies, and now I don't have to be by the sound. And then the last one is the one that's really important we talk about is that something is automatically reinforcing. There's something that feels good about it. So usually for hitting, it's going to start from one of the first 3. But if you let it go, sometimes it then becomes something that feels good. It's like, well, hitting my hand against that, there's for some people that feels good. So we don't want it to get to that one because that's no bueno. So we want to deal with it really quickly. And how we deal with it is that an expert will look at it and go, it's probably a combo platter of the 3. And they will train you and the family to be able to put things in his bucket ahead of time so that he is getting attention and that we teach him the right way to say, can I have some mom time? But also giving him mom time without him asking for it, right? Making a special time of the day that's just about him where he gets to be the star of the show for that period of the day. But if he does any of the hitting behavior, the rewards don't happen. And he doesn't get attention and he doesn't get access to mom, that whatever it is that he's trying to get during those moments, we don't give it to him when he does this other behavior, but we give him everything under the sun if he appropriately asks for it. And with attention, we just give attention. If we see that something is attention driven, former school teacher, and the kid in class 9 times out of 10 who was acting out wanted attention. And if I put him on an attention diet, so he comes in the door before anything can happen and I go, woo, look who's here today. I love that shirt. You're looking fabulous today. Hey, which seat do you want to sit in today? Would you like to sit in the front row? Attention, attention. And he's like, what happened? right? And every 30 seconds, I give that kid attention so that he doesn't ever need to act out. That's change of life, you know? So I would say you got to have an expert in looking at this, but you got to do it quickly, because especially if he's trying to hit the baby's bad plan, right? And it's going to get scary for everybody. But I can tell you, you can very quickly get this under control if you have the right expert. And if everybody in the family is on board with making sure that this little guy feels special and that he understands when I ask for attention, I can get it. And that sometimes it's all about me, and that being a big brother is like super cool. Everybody thinks I'm fabulous because I'm a big brother. This is why they make those I'm a big brother t-shirts. And, you know, I would label everything big brother. Like, maybe, you know, whatever he loves, like, let's say he loves having breakfast with grandpa, that we, you know, set aside a time every week where it's only big boy breakfast. It's just me and you. The babies can't come because it's just big boy breakfast, right? I would just be languaging all of that. Now, at 4 with autism, he may not yet understand that. It's okay. Language it anyway. It's big boy breakfast. You and I, it's just me and you. We're here, and we don't talk about the babies, and we're far removed from the babies, because only big boys can be at the big boy breakfast. It's rough. It's really, really rough. And I'm imagining in COVID, you know, talk about a handful, a 4-year-old on the spectrum, and 2, you know, it's a blessing, right? I love the t-shirts that always say, if you think my hands are full, you should see my heart, right? Because you got your hands full, but you got your heart full too. But what I love is what an amazing granddad you are, that you're writing in and saying, I'd like to be helpful in this situation. There's a lot of blessings here, right? And I know that with your help, you know, there's going to be times when this family is going to have to give attention to these 5-month-old twins. But the fact that it isn't just one person, a single mom trying to take care of all 3 kids, you know, thank goodness, because that would be super. So you've got a lot of things in your corner here, and a lot of ways that you can help her. Let me know, write to me and tell me if you think any of what I'm saying helps or applies or whatever. But please, if you haven't already, ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, you more than likely have insurance coverage for it. And that will give this little guy just the best start. And 4 is an amazing time to be doing intensive ABA with him. Amazing time to do ABA. That's what we did with my son. And, you know, my son, when he was 4, he was, by the time he was 4, he started ABA when he was 3. So by the time he was 4, he had more language, but he still wasn't caught up for language. But, you know, my son is a senior in high school, and he's already gotten 1 college acceptance, and we're waiting for the others. Fully verbal, you know, great kid. So get that ABA, make sure that they know to ask for intensive ABA, and to make him available to do the hours for ABA. It might mean that somebody comes to the house, depending on where you live. It might mean that he goes to a center, but you want to talk about attention. ABA they'll fill his bucket with attention. They'll wear him out, but that will be good. And he will be a good big brother. They will add in programs about how to be a good big brother. And if you want, I don't know if he's already doing ABA, but if he's not, let me know where you live. It might be that there's a Center for Autism and Related Disorders near you. There's a terrible shortage in therapists right now. I have to be honest with you, but fight to get these services. Now is a great time at 4. Now, I wanted to take a second because we had a parent who wrote in a big, long question. I have it here, that we were going to try to address yesterday with Dr. Doreen. But I want to at least start to talk about it today, with the understanding that I'm not an expert. But the question was, hello, ladies, I would like to ask for help with my son, who just a few weeks ago started having intense behaviors, which includes doing rituals like tapping on things, going back to step on the floor, running towards the door of the house, running to the kitchen wall. He's also crying out of nowhere. screaming, asking for help, saying things like, "Don't take me," and "I don't want to die." When my husband or myself try to stop him from doing some of the rituals, he becomes aggressive towards us or himself. I'm not sure where all this behavior came from, but it all started around Christmas time. Prior to the behaviors starting, he had a dental procedure to remove 2 baby teeth that were not coming out on their own, and adult teeth were already growing in. The experience was traumatic for the traumatic. He had to for the two. He had to be strapped down because he was trying to hit. He had never had any procedure like that done before. The whole time, from the start to the finish, he cried, screamed, and asked for help. It was the most traumatizing day. I swear, I feel like all these behaviors started days after the dentist. He has never had such rigid behaviors before. He seems scared and super anxious. It almost looks like he has panic attacks a few times a day. I asked him the other day if, after he had somewhat calmed down, why he was squeezing his head, and he replied that he heard a chin type of sound and that he wanted to touch his brain. He also added that he couldn't put his body back together, and after that there were a lot of sick people dying. Please help me. This is terrible, really terrible seeing him like this. He looks so lost and almost like he couldn't control his body or brain. Please, I don't know what to do to help him. I don't know how much longer I can see him like that. Okay. This is why I don't want to wait. I want to talk about a bunch of different things here, but let's see if we can't have a path for this parent to be able to help her child. First of all, I think it's really important that you call your pediatrician and have them test him for PANDAS. PANDAS is PANDAS, and PANDAS is it's the hallmark of it is sudden onset of anxiety. And I believe it's a blood test that they do, and it's an antibiotic that could potentially help if this is what he has. Now, it's a type, I'm just not sure whether it's a type of viral or I think it's a virus, but your pediatrician will know. And if your pediatrician doesn't know, ask them to refer you to someone who does know. You can look it up online and learn much more about PANDAS, PANDAS. But what you're describing, this very sudden onset, a lot of times kids will have this after having an illness, but I wonder if it's possible if, the removal of the teeth, maybe there's an infection. I don't know, but I think you need to call your pediatrician immediately about that. The other thing that I want you to consider is, I don't know if you're already doing ABA, but I really think you need to be doing ABA with this child. And we'll talk about all the reasons why and how those of you who are watching can hopefully prevent this kind of thing happening through the use of ABA. But I also think that you probably need to talk to a clinical psychologist because your child has suffered trauma. And again, just like we did at the beginning of the show, I don't remember if you said how old he is, but I want, we're all of us, I assume, watching this, adults. I want you to think for a second, okay, you have to go to the dentist today and you have to have teeth removed. It's traumatic, right? I don't think you say what age he is. It's traumatic. Having teeth removed is a very traumatic thing, but you and I understand the process. Okay, first, they're going to give me a horrible shot that's going to feel terrible. And then my cheek is going to go numb, which is also a very unpleasant feeling. And they might be, or they might be giving me gas. And a lot of our kids have trauma related to gas because they don't understand what's happening, that they have hallucinations in the gas and they feel a loss of control. They don't feel like they're in their body, some of the things that your child is describing. And some of our kids, and in fact, some people in general, have long-lasting effects from the gas. And if they don't have a way to put sense of it in their brain, it's horrifying. It's absolutely trauma. So I think I think you probably need a clinical psychologist to help you to language it for this child on the spectrum about what happened. You might want to make a social story after the fact now about, um, what happens at the dentist, and whatever, but you're going to have to go slowly because it might traumatize him right now. Like you might have to do systematic desensitization, which is why I think you should be with an expert, a clinical psychologist, to help them to work through all of the different aspects. And Amanda says, yeah, my son will not put on that mask now. So, we're going to have to do some back work to fix what happened. But if you think about it, if people walked into your house today, grabbed you, took you and strapped you and got in your mouth and were giving you shots and giving you a gas that made you hallucinate, it's traumatizing, right? So, I want you to hug yourself first, because I'm sure that you feel horrible that your child has been through this. And I want to tell you that, you're a good parent. You didn't do anything wrong. But I want to say to everybody else that's out there, if you know you're going to have to do a big medical procedure, there's a whole bunch of things you can do beforehand so that maybe this doesn't happen. And if you had a good ABA team, I've seen good ABA teams that like make a dentist's office. Or if we know that a kid is going in to have their tonsils out, they make the whole surgery prep. They even sometimes take not in COVID, but they take a field trip to the hospital and go, this is where they'll wheel you in. And they make a storybook about this is going to happen. And this is going to feel weird. And you're going to have a dream, and it might be a strange dream. It's okay. It's just a dream. Right. And depending on the child's ability to understand, they will tailor it, because some kids are too little to understand even what a dream is. Right. So, but now, that's for people who are like, ooh, I don't want this to happen, right? There are things you can do beforehand to get a child ready for this. The horse has already left the gate on this one, but we got to really do everything that we can for this young man. And I would guess too that what's happening in his little body is that this was so scary that he's got an overload of cortisol. And he's going to have to like slowly be brought down so that every time something happens, he doesn't feel like he's going to be strapped to a chair and have this happen again. Because if it happened once, he's probably worried that it's going to happen again. So I think if you're working with a clinical psychologist on that part of it, of how to talk to him about it and say, this will not happen again. That, we're not doing that again. And even, depending on his understanding, is saying, I'm sorry that it scared you, but this is not happening again. But Amanda's saying they give him a pre-anesthesia, but for some of our kids, the anesthesia is traumatizing. So, because everybody thinks, oh, we'll just put him out. But the whole process of, oh, somebody put a thing on me and now I cease to exist for a period of time and I don't know what happened, can be traumatizing for some of our kids. So I think it's really important to do the proper work beforehand. If you've ever had to go and do something that's like really traumatic, and afterwards you go, somebody should have told me that it was this, right? We all do better. Like fire drills. Why do we do fire drills? Because in an actual fire, we're too panicked to know what to do. But our body remembers and says it's okay. It normalizes it. So, they give him a pill that's pre-anesthesia. Oh, okay, I like that. Okay, but so I definitely think today, call the pediatrician, ask about pandas. Because literally, if it's pandas, an antibiotic is going to help him immediately. But I don't think it's just pandas. I think that the child has trauma, and I think you're going to need a clinical psychologist to help you with that. Don't think that you can just do it on your own. There's on your insurance card, on the back, there's a number to call for. I think it's supposed to be on all cards now for mental health. Call them today and say, I need a referral. My child is, and say he went to the dentist. We think that he's traumatized. He, is still like really having trouble dealing with the thing. Can I just be honest? Because you guys know that I'm very honest. When I had my son, they took me in to do a C-section and they had told me everything about it. I'd never had a surgery before, but it was traumatizing. I had a bunch of, I don't take, like for me to take a Tylenol is an event. Like I don't take medicines because my body doesn't respond well to it. And they had me drugged up. They gave me a spinal and I was drugged to the hilt. And one of the drugs started to make me nauseous. And I panicked, right? They had me strapped to a table and they had two linebacker. They got the two biggest orderlies because they knew I was going to be a problem, holding each one of my arms. My husband was there. I knew what they were doing. I was an adult woman who understood that I had a big baby and they had to do the C-section. I couldn't see anything, but I felt, them tugging the baby out of me. Couldn't wait to be a mother. But I had trauma from that event. And I had to go to a counselor and weekly talk through it. And she would say to me, "What's the problem?" And I would say, "I just keep having these daymares where I'm strapped to a table and I can't move, I can't run, and they take my baby away from me." And she was like, "Well, that did happen." But you're adding a trauma into it that didn't happen. They didn't take your baby away from you. They took your baby out of you and then they gave him. And so she just had to rework that memory in my head because I was having panic attacks that I was going to be strapped to a table and be numb and not be able to run, and they would take my baby away from me. The brain is a very interesting thing. The other thing I want to tell you as you're looking for someone to help your child is ask them if they've got somebody who can do EFT tapping with your child. I'm going to get somebody to come on here and talk with you guys about EFT tapping. It's what they use for war veterans to help them to deal with trauma. It is more effective than any medicine. It looks like mumbo jumbo, but the darn thing works. They've done so many studies on it. It's mainstream now. Your insurance will pay for it. And it's a tapping thing where they teach your child when they're having anxiety to tap, and it rewires the brain. I don't know why. We'll have somebody on to talk about it. But when you're looking for somebody, say, I need someone who can do EFT tapping, it's been, I know a lot of autism parents who've been working on it with their children, and it really helps with anxiety and trauma. I know. So EFT tapping, but I hope that you get some real help because I think your child is in pain and you're in pain watching him, and we don't want that. All right, we are out of time. In fact, we're past time. I think Traven was just about to get the hook. But let me say for tomorrow, we are back tomorrow with, I think we have Vince Redmond tomorrow. I'm not 100% positive, but yes, we have Vince Redmond tomorrow on Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. So perhaps we will continue talking about these or other things. And if you have questions that you want for an LMFT, please feel free to write those into us either tonight on our autism-live.com, or you can email them to me at s.penrod@autism-live.com. Let me not leave you without saying we would really appreciate it if you like what we have going on here. Please make sure that you like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, tweet about us, subscribe to the channel on our homepage, autism-live.com, so that you can get our weekly schedule of what's happening every week. But tell other people. This show only exists because people watch it. And we don't want to have to, people keep telling us we should do a subscription thing, and I keep saying over my dead body. But I want to stay on the air, and so the more viewers we have, the more likely that we will do that. And, our mission is to help people. And I don't have a budget to tell people through, advertisements. So we count on you to tell other people, to keep us going, and to make it, we are not on Patreon, John, and I guess it's something that we can consider, but we really don't want you to pay money. Can I be honest about that? Like, I don't want you guys to have to spend any money. So what I would rather you do is recommend us. That's really what I'm asking for, or subscribe or like, whatever you feel comfortable with. Because I would prefer not to take any of your money. And I don't know, maybe that's weird, but that's how I feel. All right. So I adore you all. We will be back tomorrow. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Mwah. Until then, bye-bye for now. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live and to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Shannon Penrod, and my better half, Nancy Allspot Jackson, is not with us today because she is still on vacazione, and we want her to take good vacazione. So she will, I think, be back with us next week. But I'm here with you, and I'm so excited to be with you here this morning. First of all, we're saying good morning to Christina and to Amanda. We're so happy that you guys are here with us. And for those of you who are like, why didn't I get a shout out? Let me just tell you, because if you will send us a message, I love to play the romper room lady and say, I see so-and-so and I see so-and-so. The way that we know that you're here is if you're watching us live. We are on YouTube, we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter and Periscope right now live. And on any of those platforms, you can just write in and say hello, and I will try to give as many shout outs as I possibly can, because we're thrilled that you're here with us and watching us live. That's also a space where you can be writing in your questions, your comments, your concerns, whatever you got going on. This is a safe space where you can say whatever you have going on. The whole show is meant to be interactive. It's our favorite part. Let's just say that. It's our favorite part is when we get a chance to interact with you guys. I used to say in the very beginning when we started this almost 10 years ago, and I would say I'm basically, at that point, we had this little studio that was a converted closet, literally. And I would say if you guys like don't talk back to me, then it feels like I'm a woman in a closet talking to a little tiny camera, and it feels crazy. Feels full on crazy. So it helps me when you are here with me, and then I feel less crazy. We are no longer in a little closet. We are now in my home because of COVID, and we've also moved studios since then, and we have a slightly bigger closet. It's significantly, we could probably fit 5 or 6 closets in there now. It's still small, but it's no longer a closet. So we kind of love that. Anyway, we're here. We love being here with you. And we got a big show planned for you. On Friday, Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Instead of jargon, we go, good morning, Nasser. See how that works? When it's Friday, we usually go over some news that we cherry pick from the week. Depending on the time of year, there's more autism news than other times of the year. We try to give you a balance of sort of everything that's happening. And every once in a while, we touch on research, although less and less, because we have our research folks who join us, and we're going to have Leah Hirschfeld do some research for us in just a second. But I couldn't pass this one up. By the way, before I forget, if you want to interact and you're not watching us live, we are on every place you get your podcast, that's where we are, at least the ones where you can get it for free. We're on iTunes, Ghana, Apple Music, Google Music, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Deezer, whatever there is, we're there, free download. We also want to encourage you, I keep forgetting to say this, but this show is free, and it's free for everyone. And I love that, and I want to keep providing it for you for free. And I want to get to as many people as we can with a message of hope. We say we're always here to provide information and inspiration, and to make sure that we all feel like we're connected. We are a big, big, huge community. Our show is for the entire autism community. Of course, individuals who are on the autism spectrum, they're the beating heart of our community, right? But here on Autism Live, we include that larger community, which is everyone who loves those individuals and is fighting for them to have the jobs, the research, the healthcare, the ability to love who they love, marry who they want to marry, work where they want to work. Yeah. So that's all of us. And what you can do to help us, we're not looking for your money. We're not asking you to open your pocketbook or your wallet. What we want you to do is share and like. And whatever platform you're on, like us, subscribe to us, share us, let other people know about us so that other people can find it. So if you like what you find here, share it. That's all we're asking for. Okay, so in the news this week, I want to start with a research thing that's a little bit dense. I wish Nancy were here because I always love it when she's like, Shannon, do you get this? And I would say, not really. But here's what I do get. Like many of you, I'm sure, just in the last year, I did the 23andMe. And it was so fascinating. And there are different levels of the 23andMe that you can do. And I decided to do this slightly, it was my birthday present, by the way. So I really want to know, I wanted to know like who is related to me, but I also wanted to know the medical side of it about like what kinds of things might I genetically be more prone to. And we've reported before on the show that now for the first time, I wasn't realizing how racially based it was due to access. So for the first time, they've been able to get a large enough sample from people who have genes that have emanated from Africa. And they're finding out much, much, much more about autism, y'all. And it's fascinating. Well, now there's a group of scientists who have found some more genetic information, which seems to show that there is a mutation in the chromosomal region. You ready for this? 22q11.2. Not going to crochet that on a pillow, right? But apparently about 21% of the people with that chromosomal region deletion have autism. And 41% of people who have that have an intellectual disability, and 23% have schizophrenia. So we know that something is at play with that chromosomal deletion. And what they're saying is that they feel that with more testing that they should be able to look at your for instance, and me or other place where you do a chromosomal test. And that as more people be able to do that, they will be able to predict your likelihood to end up having one of these diagnoses, which would mean that there would be interventions that would be put in place earlier. But it would also mean that you might be more likely to pass that trait down. So they call it a polygenic score, and it sums up the number of common genetic variants associated with whatever it is that you're looking at. And there are other genes that are associated with, for instance, schizophrenia or autism or intellectual disability. And what it would do is rate and say, well, you have this gene, and this gene, so you are this many percentage more likely to have X, Y, or Z. And again, the whole purpose of that is to be able to treat, to help look for, to red flag, to say we're going to be watching this individual to see if they, for a small child, if they end up needing intervention. For autism, we know what we can do to intervene to help that individual to have, if not completely lose the disabling aspects of it, to greatly diminish them. And the earlier we start, the better. We know that if someone is at a greater risk for an intellectual disability, that there are things that we can put in place earlier to help minimize that, right? And for schizophrenia, there are medical choices that can be made to help that individual in different ways from a medicine standpoint. Of course, we hope to get there with autism as well. So interesting at the very least. And we are seeing this being reported, excuse me, while I scroll up to see, this is in Spectrum News that we really, really love. Okay, so that's our sort of interesting story. And sometimes we have heartbreaker stories, and let me just say this one is quite the heartbreaker story. I believe we covered the beginnings of this story last year. And now a lawsuit has been filed. There's a young man 16-year-old on the spectrum who was profoundly affected by autism. His name was Eric Parsa. And I want you to imagine for a second, like in 2020, when you still could go to the mall, and that you and your family go to the mall, because you want to try, like as a treat, you want to try out the tag, the laser tag that they have, right? And you go there, and for whatever reason, your 16-year-old child has a sensory meltdown. And so what do you do? What do you do? You exit the building. And part of what was happening, and he was there with his mom and his dad, and he began to hit himself in the face. And then as they were trying to calm him, he began to hit his dad. The manager of the store, who was familiar with the family, said to Mom, "What should I do? Should I call security?" Mom said yes. And they exited the building, were outside that entrance to the mall as the teenager was having, and you and I know what this looks like, right? And we're familiar with it, but we have to acknowledge that other people, they see it and it's just like they don't know what to do. But he was hitting himself and hitting his father. And the father was sort of wrestling with him, trying to gain control of the situation. And along came one of the security people who was an off-duty cop who worked, I guess they contract with them for the mall. Not entirely sure about all that, but this police officer person came and, was attempting to help the dad. And was trying to gain control of the situation, and he had wrestled the young man to the ground, face down, and then sat on him. Now, it's reported that both the young man on the spectrum and the cop were overweight. So he's sitting on him, and Mom is on the ground talking to her son. Dad is on the ground talking to their son, trying to calm him down, and he was hysterical. And he was the cop was on his back for an extended period of time, over 8 minutes. And then, we know this story, right? We've heard this story. And then another police officer came and spelled him and also sat on the kid. And everyone says, the mistake that was made here was, sometimes you have to gain control by getting on top of someone. But then once you've gained control, you have the opportunity. I mean, as unthinkable as it is, I don't want to see any of our 16-year-olds handcuffed, right? But I would much rather see them handcuffed and sat up than to die, because this young man died. The second cop who came up and spelled the first cop stayed on his back. And eventually the boy urinated himself and went limp. And only then did they get off of him, and they called the paramedics. They were unable to revive him, and he died. And we just can't have this anymore. We just can't have this anymore. And the parents are suing. And the police department is saying really, I think, inappropriate things. And saying that the parents are just looking to blame someone where there's no one to blame. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. How dare you? How dare you? No, I'm in support of this family suing. You have to train your people better. And you got to treat people with more dignity. And you got to stop acting like just because you have the badge that it's okay to do this. It just isn't. Now, listen, I support, I have friends who are police officers. I understand what a difficult job it is, but somebody was not doing their job. And every expert agrees that the mistake made here was you have to put the person in a recovery situation. And, I know I can think of all the things that I want to go off and talk about here, but we have to start holding people accountable. We can't allow this to happen. And this could have happened to any of us. And I know we've shared before on the show that the experts are saying if you have a child with autism who's having a meltdown and somebody asks you if you want to call the police, say no. How horrible is that? But until they are properly trained and understand what they're dealing with, say no. It scares me because what could happen because we're not asking for help. I hope that I really hope that help is on the way for this. It's a problem bigger than I know what to deal with, but I got to tell you, it's the one thing I can say to you is we all need to be working together to help get the word out that a sensory meltdown from one of our kids with autism is not solved by asphyxiating them, by putting them on their stomach and getting on their backs. Just isn't. All right, I'm sorry. Horrifying, right? Let's move on to a better story in the news that starts with something really negative. I think a lot of us I certainly have been boycotting TikTok because of some of the memes that were on there in 2020 that were very inappropriate. I think TikTok is making an earnest attempt now to help repair the message that they are allowing to be spread about autism. And there's a great story in Teen Vogue this week about creators who are on the spectrum, who are promoting and being promoted on TikTok to provide a different narrative about autism. And so Teen Vogue has a great article featuring some artists that are on the autism spectrum that are having a big following on TikTok, people like Chloe Hayden. And Paige Lale, Haiti Delone. I think it's a really interesting thing to do. I want to encourage you to carefully look at TikTok. I don't encourage you to invite your children, teens, and whoever to just be on TikTok. I think there's still the potential for some bullying to happen on TikTok that might be more passive, but it's still bullying. But I want to encourage you to look at this article, find some of these folks, curate that content for yourself and for your family. Take a look at some of these people on TikTok and share them with your children and teens on the spectrum. I always, when I'm talking to other parents, one of the things that I'm really fond of talking about is that it's so important, it's essential to give really good role models for our kiddos on the spectrum. And I know when my son was little, people will say to me, how did you tell your son about autism? And I said, we decided everybody has different decision, right? About when and how and where. But whatever you do, make it positive. That's the one thing I ask you, make it positive because there's no reason not to, right? That's the best possible thing to do. And we felt that making it positive and showing role models on a regular basis and saying, look at this individual and introducing them, sometimes there are people on TV. So introducing them is not introducing them, right? It's just saying, oh, look at this person. Isn't he awesome? Isn't he cool? And our first person was James Durbin. He was on American Idol. And so we would watch American Idol with our son and we would go, I really like James. Hey, you have the same name as him. Your name is James and his name is James. Isn't he cool? He's this great rocker. He's absolutely fabulous. And you know what else, James? He sings and you sing. You have that in common. Isn't that wonderful? Do you know what else James has? He has something called Tourette's syndrome. So sometimes he says things or he coughs or he burps or whatever, and he doesn't really have control over it. But, it doesn't stop him from singing. But sometimes he does that. Isn't that interesting? You know what else James has? James has autism, just like you. Isn't that funny? You have all those things in common. You don't have Tourette's. You have some things not in common. He plays the guitar. You don't yet. So we would talk about things in common, things not in common, but we'd go, isn't James fabulous? And so we hoped that would build his self-esteem of, James is fabulous. I'm fabulous. We both have autism and that's fabulous. There's absolutely nothing to hide, be embarrassed, be ashamed of, right? So here are these people on TikTok that you can follow and curate and show to your child so that they have role models. There are all kinds of people now that are on the spectrum, that are out there about it, that are amazing and doing amazing things. And I really encourage you. There's even characters in movies and in and Marvel movies. And there's the one Power Ranger who's on the spectrum. So I encourage you to utilize those. I see that our guest is here, and I don't want to take up too much more time, but those are our stories for this week. It's always more fun when Nancy's here with us. But in any case, we are welcoming back to the show Leah Hirschfeld, and she is joining us to talk about research. Leah, take just a second and tell us about what you do at CARD and how that involves research.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Leah. I am a research coordinator here at CARD. And what that means is I'm part of our research team, and we spend our days trying to answer or think of ways to answer questions that we think will benefit everyone that we serve. And our research team likes to think of themselves as a support team. And we really think of everyone that we serve as not just our patients and not just our families, but also our clinicians, our supervisors, and our behavior techs. And even actually our insurance groups as well, because they're all involved in the care that we provide. So I have a pretty cool job, if I say so myself, where I get to spend my day looking up articles, answering questions, interacting with participants, running them through an intervention, analyzing data, writing up that data analysis so that we can get it out to everyone, so that we can really provide the best care that we can here at CARD with the best resources and the most thoughtfulness about the resources that we have. So it's pretty neat, if I say so myself. And then I get to come on here once a month.
Yay! That's great.
Yeah.
We love that. And I didn't warn you, it's just me today, no Nancy, because she's on vacation, but I'm thrilled that you're here. Remind me what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, one of the things that we try to do when we come on is I'm happy to always talk about any topic, but I don't know as much as your audience about what they want to hear. So we try to take questions from our audience members and any topics. And I think one of the topics was offered was racial and gender disparity in the ASD diagnosis. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. I know it's a kind of sensitive topic, and I'll also point out, we're two white women talking about it. Well, I'm going to assume you're white, Shannon. I'm not. I don't know exactly.
Yes,
but
I am considered Caucasian. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so it's two white women talking about this. But we're going to try, or I'll try, and I know Shannon, so actually I'll say we. We'll try our best to be thoughtful and sensitive about the topic. But I'm really excited about the research I have to show.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that you're going to be talking about it. It is timely. So what have you got for us?
Yeah, so there's this really cool article, and I'll also say, I try to come on the show and present research that is pretty new. So something that came out this year or 2020. And so this article came out last year in 2020, which is weird to say. And it's by Cantor and his colleagues at the University of Seattle, and it was looking at microaggressions in racially charged patient-provider interactions. And I'll say, I'll tie this into ABA clinicians. This paper, though, specifically was with medical doctors. And so it was with medical students and first or second year doctors, which actually the paper states as a limitation. These are only our early career medical practitioners that they're looking at. But it's a really interesting article. And before I launch into it, actually, I'll also throw in that it's an open access article. And so what that means is with research you publish in a journal, and that's kind of what that means, peer reviewed, is that another peer reviewed it, another scientist reviewed it, and that goes in the journal. So that's a great hallmark that this is a good, well-reviewed paper, but you usually have to have a subscription to those journals. So not all research is free and open to everyone. However, this paper is. So that's what open access means. It means that usually the researchers paid an extra fee or something like that to make sure that everyone had access to this. And that's super exciting and important because it's a really great article. And it's a really important article that, as a caregiver, you can download it and just provide it to your doctor, to your ABA clinician, to your IEP folks, anyone you want, without any concerns about copyright and things like that. So with all those caveats, let me explain what the research is. So what this group did was they took their medical providers and they put them in two groups. So they either had a workshop intervention where they went through a training that I'll explain in a second, or there was no training. They had a workshop where they didn't do anything. which is really good to see in a paper because it means that they can actually look at the intervention and say, okay, this group did the intervention, this group didn't, and what differences do we have? Not all papers do that. Some are limited and can't and don't have the ability to do that, but this one did, which was awesome. And so what they did was they trained folks on mindfulness, so paying attention in a thoughtful way on the present moment and non-judgmentally. And then they also encouraged contact. And what they said was contact was a close and trusting relationship that was formed from two people having a lovely conversation, where one person engages in a vulnerable self-disclosure and the other person is responsive in a thoughtful way, understanding and validating and caring. And to some extent, because these are medical professionals with patients, one group is already in a vulnerable self-disclosure kind of off the bat, right? So this was really working on the medical folks engaging in responsiveness, understanding, validating, and caring. And so what they had was they had patients and providers do a pre-workshop intake, do the workshop, and then do a post, and they compared. Post being after. And then they compared. And what they did was they had the providers do a self-report. So when they say, I felt much less biased and things like that. And they also had folks score the interactions. And the really cool thing about the folks who were scoring is that they didn't know if the interactions they were viewing, if those people had gone through the training or not.
These were impartial third-party people scoring them.
Exactly. Okay. And it's really important that it was impartial, that they didn't know that one group had gone through the training or not, because subconsciously and unconsciously, people sometimes score things differently knowing that they went through the training. It's not anyone's fault. It just kind of happens naturally. So it's really great that these folks didn't know. And so what they found was that when the folks had gone through this training, which was mindfulness and just being thoughtful and caring and responsive, that the scores were better, that there was more emotional rapport and more responsiveness, less microaggressions when the folks went through the training, and that the folks who went through the training also self-reported that they felt much better prepared and less biased when they had interactions with folks of color and non-white folks. I'll pause here and then I'll kind of connect this to how it relates to all of the all of the ABA stuff that I want to talk about as well.
Okay.
Cool. And I'll throw in, one of the things I try to do when I come on to is kind of digest research so that, if you download this paper, you can read it yourself and feel comfortable. And one of the things I want to point out is to always look at the limitations in a paper. Researchers do a really thoughtful and should do a really thoughtful and good job writing out everything that could have been better about their study, because no one's perfect. And where you find this in a paper, you get your introduction. That'll give you all the background information you should need to know to understand what's going to come next in the paper. Then you get your methods. That's going to explain everything the researchers did. This is super important because it means that a paper should be replicable. Someone should take this information, repeat it, and as long as the research is valid and good, get the same results, right? So that's your methods. Results, going to be some nitty-gritty numbers and statistics. And then in your discussion, that's where the researchers are going to say, this is why this is so important. This is why we're so excited about it. P.S. These are our limitations and why this needs to be better. And these are our strengths and why we're so excited about it. But it's all there to really talk about, what went well and what didn't. So always look at the limitations. The researchers were really thoughtful about saying, we didn't have enough people, which is what this article said, that they're younger professionals, or not younger, but newer professionals in the field. And one of the interesting things too they note is that this was only short-term gains. So they did a pre-intervention, went through the intervention, and then almost immediately after they analyzed another interaction with a patient. But they didn't look at 6 months later, 12 months later, 18 months later. So we don't know that this lasts for the rest of the career, but we do know this is short-term gains, and that's awesome still. And so where I tie this in for ABA is
Well, can I ask this before you get there? Before you get there, what did they find? Did they find that if they were given mindfulness, that they did show empathy, and they helped these people on a deeper level than if they didn't, regardless of race?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what they found. They found that participants scored better on emotional rapport and responsiveness and had less microaggressions. Exactly.
And so I'm assuming the flip is true, that if they didn't get this training, that they noted microaggressions, that they noticed things that were missed, and that it seemed to be tied to race. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
That makes me want to throw up.
If you look at the paper, it is super sad, and it's sad, and also something that I think has been better documented recently. But yeah, if you look at it, they had their participants who were patients were Black folks who came in, and they were actually Black actors. So this was at the teaching hospital, and the reason that they did it as actors was to make sure that the interactions were the interactions that the researchers wanted to look at, and the interactions, the scenarios between patient and practitioner were really supposed to be negative, and not negative, but ones that challenge stereotypes and interactions. So ones that might trigger someone into thinking that someone is looking for drugs rather than actual pain treatment, right? Or something like that. So they were really thoughtful about that. And if you download the article and look at some of the comments that were stated between practitioner and patient, they are very sad. And there's some lovely ones too, that some people went through the training and had lovely interaction with, I'm so sorry, this is super crummy. But there are also some sad ones, which really are eye-opening to the experience of non-white patients, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now let's relate this to ABA and the world of just having a child who's on the autism spectrum and trying to get any kind of treatment for them, whether it's get them looked at. I can recall when my son had the flu and we went to the emergency room, and a kid in his class we went to the emergency room on the same day, treated by the same people, but they did not disclose that the child had a diagnosis of autism, and they treated that child entirely different than our child. And now, I just want to say that I think that there are a lot of us. I'm a 58-year-old white woman, and it's not that I don't think that there is prejudice in the world, and that I don't think that there are microaggressions. But I think that, like a lot of people, I have blinders on, and I it's that failure to take other people's perspective, because I assume that people mean well and have love in their heart, for everyone. That is my assumption. And the last 5 years has been a re-education of me and other people, where we have to smell the coffee and realize that there's a much bigger problem, and be in support of folks who have been telling us their whole lives that there's stuff going on. It's just horrible. It's just horrible. But in any case, so talk to us about in the world of autism and ABA, is this happening?
Yeah, it is happening. And it's pretty well documented that, so I'll start at the bigger level here, right? So several racial groups, Black, American Indian, Hispanic, Latinx, are underrepresented as BCBAs and BCBADs, which are the PhD BCBAs. And so what that means is that it is likely that a non-white patient, that a non-white child with autism will have a white clinician. I think this is important to kind of note, right? Because it means that you're coming at this with very different perspectives and assumptions. And to your point, it's always important that everyone I think everyone does come, not everyone, but I think there is a lot of folks who are in this field who come with love and support and want to be the best they can for folks. But I also think there's a lot of assumptions being made. And so one of the recommendations is, have a really honest, open communication. And to the point of this paper that talked about contact, one person's vulnerable. The other person does need to be caring and thoughtful in their response. Otherwise, it can it can backfire. It can be really negative. But if you're open and honest, and that other person also wants to be open and honest, you can have that important conversation with your clinician and really point out, hey, that's not what we do in my culture. That's not how you might make that assumption because we're all Americans, but that's not what's important here. What's important to me is actually this value or something like that. And explaining, that difference is really important, or also explaining, that you've had a negative experience with the clinician being a non-white individual and what that was for you, right? And really you hope the clinician is responsive in a positive way and doesn't just say, well, that's your fault because you're this color or something like that, which, like, God forbid. And everyone really should be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for telling me. Like, that's really, it's a lot to be vulnerable there. But I think that's the beginning of that conversation and discourse to try to bridge that gap here, as we know that there's a lot more white clinicians who will be serving non-white patients, unfortunately. We also know that white children are more likely to receive an ASD diagnosis compared to Latino and Black children. We also know Black families are more likely to report that the child's healthcare needs are not stable. And I think that's all, again, where you can come and bring this paper that we just talked about, and it's open access again. So you can download it right now, this Cantor and colleagues 2020 from University of Seattle, and say, this is important. You need to listen to me. Like, this is being brushed off because I'm not white, and this is really important.
Is this Cantor with a C or with a K?
With a K. Thank you. That's a great question. Cantor, Kanter, 2020. Download it, take it to your doctors, take it to your clinicians, and just ask them to read it. It's eye-opening. And it's not, I love that the intervention they did, the treatment they did, was thoughtful and present and non-judgmental and empathetic. Everyone can do that. Everyone needs to be more thoughtful about that. So it's not like anyone needs to go through a totally different reality and change it. It's just that you need to be thoughtful and really present in the moment when you're talking to someone, and really engage them empathetically, as if they're like a friend would. So we also know Latino and Black families report lower quality of care. Latino families actually report the lowest quality of care, even though they have similar socioeconomic disadvantages to Black families. Not 100% sure why. It might be immigration, language differences. On the language front, we know that non-English speaking families also report a lower quality of care. And we also know that Latino and Black families of a child with autism are more likely than white families of a child with autism to report that their doctor doesn't listen. So again, taking this paper and really being open and honest about your experiences with your clinician. Clinicians, please be respectful. I know everyone is trying, but it's even more than just, okay, it's you saying, wow, that's really terrible. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I will try my best to be thoughtful. Tell me about your values. Tell me what's important to you culturally. And really be thoughtful about it. I have some other ideas as well, but I'll take a break to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I want to hear your ideas, because as you've been sitting and talking about this, I just have been saying, I am always at a loss about, I don't know what to do. This is not okay for me. When I think about what it's like for other caregivers, I know how hard it was for me. And I always say when I'm speaking, and I can't imagine, I'm a white woman who was raised with the idea that I could talk to anyone and that I could complain to anyone and I could say this isn't right, that I was empowered and felt that I was empowered to, argue. And I did. And it was so hard. It was like climbing Mount Everest for me. So I always say, what is it like for someone who doesn't have all that, the feeling that you have the privilege to be able to do that, or not having the citizenship papers, or not having the command of language, I mean, like all of those things, it bothers the heck out of me. But and I hear you say, well, we should take this paper into our doctors. And I was thinking, we all should. We shouldn't wait. We should not wait until there is a problem. And we should not assume that someone who is having the problem should be the person to take the paper. But I feel that there's got to be more that can be done. And obviously my head turns to what can we do here at Autism Live to encourage this. I know that at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, all of the clinicians have been going through a mindfulness training. And I'm thrilled to hear that. I think that that's remarkable, but I'm sure that there's something, I feel like there has to be more, and it can't just be a few people doing it. We've all got to do a part of the heavy lifting here. So give me some ideas of what we all can do. And in particular, I'm going to be listening for what I can do.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much there that you just said that I'm so excited that you said. I think I'll hit the easy one. CARD is doing some really cool stuff. They're doing the compassion training. They're doing cultural competencies. So there is, and we're the largest provider of ABA. So there is change going on here. It might be slow, but it's coming and it's already there. So that's super exciting. I think to your point, right, as someone who is privileged, who is someone who has always been said, you can talk to whoever, you can advocate whoever, there won't be any backlash to you because you're white. It's super important to partner with folks who who don't look like us here, right? And to say, how can I support you? What can I do? And I think it's true too at your centers, at your doctor's office, to jump in as well when you see anything or at any point and just say, I support whatever's going on with the patient here. Like, I support them. I'm here for them. Please listen to them. Please, be an active participant, be an active partner. And I think it's super important what you just said, right? That like everyone goes into their doctor's office with this article. It's not just folks who are non-white. It's the white folks who have to go in and say, I read this article and I thought it was super interesting, really eye-opening, especially because I'm not that type of person. Like I don't look like that. So I haven't had those experiences necessarily in the same way, but the paper does a great job really giving voice to those experiences, which is nothing compared to actually having those experiences and describing them, but it's something, right? So I think, you as a white person, we need to be thoughtful and advocate as well in a way that still gives voice to the folks who actually need their voices heard, and not so much for us.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's, I don't know that I've told this story on the show before, but I guess it's like almost 3 years ago now. I'd been going to the same cardiologist for a number of years and had the same nurse for a number of years. And, she seemed like a perfectly lovely person and was always kind to me. And one day I went in and I was very nervous because I was going to be talking with a cardiologist about a very specific thing that makes me nervous, a procedure that I might have to have done. And so I was a little preoccupied, and she came in and she was taking my vitals, and I don't know how, but in the course of taking my vitals, she began to talk and say the most horrible racist things I have ever heard in my entire life. And I was paralyzed. I was paralyzed, and I was like, what on earth do I do? It was so shocking to me. And I didn't know what to do. And I literally shut down. I mean, because that's me from past things in my life. It was like, shut down. I did say a couple of things to her I won't go into so that she would stop. But then the doctor came in and I was like, do I report her to the doctor? What do I do? Do I go ask for the office manager? What do I do? And I didn't know. So I left and called my husband and cried in the car and said, I don't know what to do. I ended up, it's an office that has multiple offices. I called the office manager of all the offices and put in a report and a written report. And I just want to say, I felt so much better for having reported it, but I still feel horrible that in the moment, I should have screamed fire or something, and then had everybody come in and said, this woman is saying racist things and you have to fire her right now. Because I feel like the more time between when I complained, it didn't end well, is what I'm getting to, is that they eventually sat her down and talked to her, and then came back and reported to me. And I said, I figured they wouldn't, but they came back and reported they didn't fire her. And they even admitted to me that she said some inappropriate things in the discussion that they had, and they didn't fire her. And I left that cardiologist over it and said, I'm not coming back there. But, I have the ability to go find another cardiologist. And I kept thinking, what if you didn't? What if you didn't? And it's still, I guess I'm just admitting how helpless I felt in the moment. And it was very eye-opening to me because, first of all, I'd never heard anything like that in my life. I didn't know it existed. And I'd heard about it, but not heard I'd heard, like people talking about it as like something in a movie. I'd never heard it before. It was so shocking and eye-opening to me. And it still bugs the crap out of me. I feel not empowered. I feel not empowered. So I cannot imagine and all I kept thinking about was how had she been treating people in that office for years, if that's what's in her head and in her heart. It sickens me. And if it sickens me, what must it feel for the person that it's aimed at?
Right.
For heaven's sake. So anyway, I know I've taken this to another place, but they're wanting to know again, the name of it is Cantor and what?
So it's Cantor et al., and colleagues, because there's 8 people on this. I'm trying to make sure I have the name so I can send it over. It's called.
I think I can find it now.
Okay, cool. If you do Cantor, Kanter, 2020 microaggressions, this will probably pop up because the whole title is Addressing Micro-Racially Charged Patient-Provider Interactions. It's very long, but microaggressions, Cantor with a K, Anter, 2020 will probably get you this open access article. If it doesn't, I'm going to try this private chat function on here. I haven't tried it before. I sent that over.
There we go. There you got it in the private chat. Traven, if you can take that and stick that in the public chat. But the point that I was making is it's hard to stand up and complain, and it doesn't always work, and it isn't always lovely. So it's hard to have the guts, and sometimes it's not even like having the guts, it's knowing what to do in the moment. We can start with this paper and we can say that everyone should be on board with sharing this paper with their healthcare providers. But if you're feeling funny about it, if it feels awkward, if it feels, just imagine how it would feel if something were actually happening. Because I can't even imagine how much more awkward that is. That's why I went off on that tangent. What else can we do though besides that?
Well, and I think your point is really valid, right? We run into these experiences, and again, as a white person, we run into these experiences, and they're terrible. And I can't even imagine what this is like for anyone who's not as privileged as we are. But I think it's worth also mentioning, after those or before those interactions, thinking about how you would go about if, God forbid, you have this interaction, right? Like if you have something in your head where you're like, if I encounter a microaggression, if I encounter a macroaggression where someone's just blatantly racist, if I encounter one of these interactions as a white person, what can I do and what can I say, right? And what will my action be? It might be, like you said, to not frequent that place anymore, and unless they're gonna fire that individual. It might be something else. I'm not sure. But thinking about what you can say if you see these interactions, I think prepares us as much as it can, which is quite small, but prepares to, as much as we can, if and when those situations occur, to say, you know what, I know what I'm going to say, and really be brave. Like, it's not fair that this is only on the folks who actually have those interactions. It's also on us to say, that's not okay. And until this is made better, I'm not coming here. This is inappropriate. And it's scary for us to have to say it. And I can't even imagine how terrifying it is for anyone who doesn't look like us. and it's terrible. But yeah, so I think, rehearsing, preparing, thinking a little bit about what you would do in that situation, just spend 5 minutes thinking about it might make it a little easier, if it's even easier, if and when that happens.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yes, way unfortunately. But I also, folks that are, there is a board, the BCBA, who is supposed to be responsive to ethical concerns about treatment, that anyone who is a BCBA is supposed to be governed by that board. I would assume, but I don't know, that if you had a complaint that you felt that you were not being treated with fairly, or that there was a microaggression or anything, that you could level a complaint with the BCAB. Could you not?
Yes, I believe so. I honestly, I don't know, to be completely honest, but I'm sure I have to imagine absolutely. There's also certainly other avenues too at least CARD. If you have something like that with your supervisor, you can always talk to your office manager. They might be able to give you additional resources as well, to be, to confront that kind of situation. But I think definitely like the BCBA board, I'm sure, because we have ethical guidelines. BCBAs have ethical guidelines, and it's certainly to provide fair and equitable treatment to everyone, regardless of anything. Yeah, absolutely.
So one of our viewers, and forgive me if I say you've got a beautiful name, and I don't know if you pronounce it Aisha. It's beautiful. I would love to know how to pronounce it. But she says, Shannon, I'm Cuban. And I am sure no one has to be discriminated, neither for his or her ethnic, nor culture or religion. Everyone has to be treated with respect, more if you are receiving a treatment in a clinic or a hospital. And I believe I have seen some people doing these terrible things. And I also have reported, and she gave a website, there.believe.me. So I will definitely check that out. I do think it is all of our responsibility, and I like the idea of rehearsing something in case you see something that is not okay. Listen, if it had been happening, if there had been anybody else in the room, this is how I'm good at. If I see anybody doing something to anybody else, it's like trigger, and I'm like verbal, and I'm there. But if somebody is saying something and it's just me, shut down. Eventually I did say something, so that she would stop. But man, I had such a hard time for days afterwards, because I said, what was it that she looked at me and thought I would think that was okay?
Right.
Like, what was it about? Was it the way I was dressed? Is it my haircut? Like, what did she look at me and think I would agree with her and think that that was okay? Man, that just leveled me. But I want to make sure that I'm living my life so that I'm clear that I loved the other day. I was watching when President Biden was swearing in his new appointees. And he's, and he said a lot of wonderful things. They don't show on the news the whole thing, but he said a lot of wonderful things about, I believe that you folks are called to be here. You're about to work harder than you've ever worked. I want to stop for a second and thank your families, because there are going to be times when we're going to ask you to put in long hours, and they're going to suffer because of it. But if your heart is in the right place, you're going to do amazing things. They're going to help people. But then he stopped and he said, but here's the bottom line. Everyone has to be dealt with fairly and with dignity. And if I ever hear you ever talking to anyone, a coworker, anyone, and not doing it with dignity, I don't care. I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to talk to you about it. I will fire you on the spot. We're not doing this. So just know. And I was like, woo! I mean, I think that's how it should always be, right? Mm-hmm. Wherever you are, not just in the White House, but I was happy to hear him say that, because that's how it should be. And I do want to say that I think that there are a lot of ABA providers. There's been a big push in the last 2 years that this is being talked about at every single level. I think there's a big push to encourage more people of all different races and religious backgrounds to get the training that they need to be clinicians for autism, but that there is also a big push for this mindfulness training of which you speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's exciting that this is happening. I think it's a little, I wish it happened earlier.
Yeah, it's a little, it's a day late and a dollar short, but we got to move in that direction.
Absolutely. And I'll throw in too, speaking more about what folks can do. Again, unfortunately, if you're in this situation, if you have some kind of rehearsal, I think that helps. I don't know if it will. I think these are just crummy interactions. But anything we can do to prepare ourselves, unfortunately, I think gives us a better chance of success to see a world that we want to see reflected. But I think also as a caregiver talking to a clinician, I think there's sometimes assumptions about cultural preferences and things. Please be vocal about those cultural preferences, about your preferences in general. So, I understand that this might be really important, but for me and my family, this is what's important. And especially, if there is a cultural background for why that's important, that's so great to share with your clinician. I think too, and it's something we're trying at CARD also to talk to clinicians, to not do closed-ended questions, to have open-ended questions saying, well, what do you think, why, etc. But if a clinician asks you a yes or no question that you're like, man, I wish you had given me more room, take the room. Offer what else, right? If they're like, oh, is sleep intervention important? And that's a yes or no or something, and you're like, yes, but you also need to know this about us, that we stay up later, that, it is important, but actually this is really important for me. Whatever it is, add more information there. And follow up on questions or topics that you don't think your clinician has addressed or hasn't addressed sufficiently for you. If you're like, we talked about, but I don't feel like we've talked about it enough. I need to bring it up again. And this is why. This is my cultural background about why, bedtime is super important, or bedtime isn't as important for us because X, Y, or Z, whatever it might be. So really be, it's a partnership, and everyone is unfortunately learning still. I wish that wasn't the case, but, be vocal with your clinician, and if you feel comfortable, provide those experiences. And clinicians, please be thoughtful and respectful. Treat everyone with dignity, and as if, if you had heard this story from anyone else, what response would you want to give them, right? That I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for telling me about that. I wish that wasn't the experience. How can I make that not your experience anymore? And open-ended questions that will provide a partnership and a conversation there. And advocate. Everyone needs to advocate, not just folks who are non-white. It's just as important, if not more important, that white folks also do it, and fix the system.
Yeah. And I love what you were saying about make sure that all of us are talking with our clinicians about what our preferences are in our home, whether they're religious, whether they're ethnic, I know we have a lot of families who will talk to us about the fact that perhaps they are, their ethnicity is Middle Eastern, and that they have different rules around being at the table. And some folks, sit on the floor to eat and use different utensils to eat. And these are really important things to not feel squeamish about saying to your provider, these are our preferences. This is how we live our lives. I will tell you, for us, there was a very hotly debated topic at the time, but it was very important to us that in our son's ABA training that he know about same-sex marriages, and that be very normalized, because we had many friends that, his friends had two dads or had two moms. And we wanted to make sure that that was a part of the training. And the first therapist that was teaching him something about relationships and was teaching about marriage, and they were asking something about, well, who's married here? And he was like, well, these two guys. and the therapist, and he was young, and I saw the therapist was like, and so we brought it up. We were like, hey, we need for that to be a part of this. That's super important to our family. that be a part of this. And we loved that Card was like, got it. Tick in a box, we're with you on this. There was no discussion about it. We didn't have to defend it. It wasn't, well, we might have a no. It was, this is your preference. This is what we'll be teaching. So and that was important to us. And everybody has things that they need to be sharing. We're unfortunately out of time, but Leah, if they have questions and they want to know, because you've got a bunch of different topics that we gave you for the next couple of months, but we're always taking more. So should they write to me or to you? Who should they write to if they have questions?
Totally anyone they want, honestly. I'm sending over this email as well to maybe put it on saw that before, the banner. Shannon, if they have your email, send it to you if that's the easiest thing. I know you always forward it over. There's also research@centerforautism.com. That's a direct line. There you go, research@centerforautism.com. That's a direct line to me, our research director, Karen, and some other team members. So any which way it'll get to us. And please, send us any questions, any issues you run into, anything we can provide research on. Ask us. Any research questions we can answer, ask us. Because we love it, and it's what we're here for, right? So we want to be partners, and we feel like we're partners. Hopefully everyone else does. But we want to be partners, and so if we know what questions are important, we will make sure and take the time to thoughtfully address them and provide the research that's available. So,
okay. And if you feel, I just feel the need to say this before we go, if you feel that you have been discriminated against by someone in the field of ABA and you don't feel like you can raise a flag or a banner, do me a favor, reach out to us. We'll send them this article. We're happy to do that and not disclose who you are. But if you know somebody who needs to have that article and you don't feel like you can send it to them, let me know and we'll do that. I can do that. So anyway, we're out of time. Leah, thank you so much for this topic. Obviously, there's so much more to talk about, but we really, really appreciate you talking about this. She will be back next month. In fact, we've got it scheduled regularly now that she's here on the third Friday of every month. She or someone from the team, because sometimes it can't be you, sometimes it's Karen Nolte. So we will look forward to that. All right, you guys, we'll be back next Monday, and we have Bonnie Yates back on Monday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you guys so much.